Chapter 1828. Since the death of the original princess, he had always wanted to die. Even when he met Mu Yulan and fell in love with her at first sight due to her beauty and temperament, it did not dispel his desire to die. He had always felt guilty towards the princess, and this guilt did not diminish as time went by. Instead, it grew stronger and stronger. Whenever he woke up in the middle of the night, he would cry and recall the past. The scenes of him and the princess seemed to be right in front of his eyes. He could not free himself from it and wanted to commit suicide to follow the princess. Unfortunately, he could not make up his mind because he was a grandmaster while the princess was not a grandmaster. She was just an ordinary person and would probably enter the reincarnation cycle after death. However, she had the identity of the princess, so she could enter the grandmaster's boundary. He hated himself for being useless and not being able to save the princess from death. Secondly, he hated himself for being heartless and did not treat the princess well when she was alive. He clearly liked her, but pretended to be indifferent and hurt the princess. Now that he thought about it, he was so stupid, but he had no chance to make up for it. The better Mu Yulan treated him, the more guilty he felt. He felt that he had killed too many people and was an unlucky person. He was afraid that he would be implicated if he stayed by her side. This time was an example. Instead of that, he might as well go back and find the princess. Mu Yulan knew his mind very well. Usually, she could only use gentleness to resolve the obstacles in his heart, but this time, she did not force him and called Lu Yurong. As long as Lu Yurong came, Chuli could come. As soon as she thought of this, Lu Yurong appeared in a snow-white dress and came to Mu Yulan. She said in surprise, "Senior Sister Mu." As she spoke, her bright eyes scanned the situation. She only nodded at Lung Shorin and then ignored him. She struck out 2 Empyrean fairy palms with her palms, and Mu Yulan followed suit. The 4 palms merged into one, and the strength of the 2 was not stacked but increased by a few times. Bang! A celestial man flew out and spat blood in the air. Then his body suddenly lit up and rose into the sky. The Empyrean fairy palm that the 2 women used together was extremely powerful. Mu Yulan was refreshed and smiled. "Yurong, you're here," Lu Yurong said. "What's going on?" The 2 of them joined their hands together with great power and completely protected King Ping. The other 5 celestial beings were no longer a threat and were at a disadvantage under the joint attack of the 2 women. Lu Yurong's cultivation on Goddess Attraction Mountain improved by leaps and bounds. With Shao Qi, who cultivated the regal sword scripture, by her side, the 2 of them constantly exchanged pointers and secretly competed with each other. In a competitive environment, their cultivation speed increased. Moreover, she had obtained the complete inheritance of the Empyrean fairy technique. This technique was extremely profound and powerful. It was originally an absolute art from the sky beyond heaven, and even though her cultivation was not as good as an enlightened deity's, she already possessed some of the enlightened deity's abilities. She could break through space and stand in the void. When Lung Zhifei and Lung Shorin saw this, they calmed down and focused on the opponents in front of them. Gradually, they regained their advantage. Lung Shorin opened his mouth, but there was nothing he could say. Originally, they were very close to each other, but now they were like strangers. Everything was because of him, and he regretted it. Unfortunately, he was a king and could not turn around and curry favor with the subject. Even if the subject was his most important confidant, he could only make the best of his mistakes and come to this point. There were only 7 of the 8 celestials left, and they looked at each other when they saw this. Suddenly, their bodies shone brightly, so bright that one could not look directly at them. Their cultivation level skyrocketed. Lu Yurong scoffed. "Who are these sneaky people?" Mu Yulan said, "I only know that they want to kill your royal highness. I hate sneaky assassins the most." Lu Yurong scoffed. The color of blood gradually faded from their faces, and they became like pure white jade. They were glistening with clear light, and their power increased greatly. They also used the secret technique of the Empyrean fairy technique to block the storm-like attacks of the celestials. Bang! Suddenly, there was a muffled sound, and one of the celestials exploded. From the explosion, a bright light shot straight into the sky. Lu Yurong flew backward. She did not expect the celestial in front of her to self-destruct without warning, and the power was so strong. King Ping said in a low voice, "Miss Lu." Lu Yurong waved her hand in the air, and then she spat out an arrow of blood. Bang, 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 bang. A series of explosions sounded one after another, and rays of light shot into the sky. Mu Yulan was hit by several explosions, and she flew backward, spitting out a few mouthfuls of blood. She was already unconscious when she flew backward. King Ping was not spared either. He flew backward while spitting out blood and shot toward Lung Shorin. Lung Shorin helplessly took a step to his side, caught him in the air, and immediately sealed several of his acupuncture points. Lung Shorin's opponent did not chase after him, but pounced toward Mu Yulan. Seeing this, Lu Yurong could only force herself to stand in front of Mu Yulan and met the middle-aged man's palm. Bang! She spat out another mouthful of blood and flew backward, almost crashing into Mu Yulan. She turned her body and held Mu Yulan, and her inner energy was already flowing into Mu Yulan. Both of their inner energies came from the same source, and they did not repel each other, which helped her heal with twice the results with half the effort. The middle-aged celestial did not let up, and once again, he hit her with his palm, and his body suddenly lit up. Bang! With a muffled sound, the middle-aged man also exploded and turned into a ray of light that shot into the sky. Lu Yurong's expression changed. She and Mu Yulan could not avoid this attack, and it was too late to shift through the void. Just as she was about to shift by force, there was a flash in front of her, and Chu Li appeared in front of her. Chu Li took a step back and shook his head. The power of the Celestial's explosion was indeed shocking, but his supreme, indestructible body of Vajra was even more amazing. It actually blocked it, and his white robe did not even wrinkle. "Why are you here?" Lu Yurong smiled like a flower. She felt the elusive Ninth Heaven Fairy's call for help and directly shifted from the void of Goddess Attraction Mountain to here. But Chu Li was not at Goddess Attraction Mountain at all, so she did not expect him to appear. Chu Li smiled and shook his head and looked at the Celestial who was fighting with Lung Zhifei and sighed, "The Zheng Dynasty's Celestial? Man proposes, God disposes." The old man with white eyebrows and beard shook his head. They had already calculated everything, including all the martial arts masters in Fairy's capital, and were originally very confident, but they did not expect Lu Yurong and Chu Li to appear. They originally thought that Chu Li did not have a good relationship with the Lung family and would not interfere. Chu Li scoffed coldly, sinister intentions. The Zheng Dynasty Celestial came to assassinate King Ping, obviously because King Ping knew how to use troops, and their intentions were obvious. The old man smiled and suddenly disappeared in a flash. Chu Li's god-slaying thunder sword had already been activated. Bang! The old man swayed and staggered a step, looking at Chu Li in surprise. Chu Li said lightly, "Since you're here, do you still want to leave?" "Good, good." The old man already knew that he could not escape, and it was impossible to step into the void. Chu Li's method was similar to a soul attack. He could not withstand more than a few hits, and in the end, he would still die, and his soul would be scattered. He made up his mind and fiercely pounced on Lung Shorin and King Ping. Bang! The old man exploded and turned into a ray of light that shot into the sky. Chu Li appeared in front of Lung Shorin and King Ping and blocked the attack. He took 2 steps back, and his face quickly turned pale. He could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood and smiled bitterly. "This guy is so strong." "Chu Li," Lu Yurong hurriedly said. Chu Li waved his hand and smiled, wiping the blood from the corner of his mouth. "Don't worry." He looked at Lung Zhifei with a faint smile. Chapter 1829. As soon as he met Chu Li's gaze, Lung Zhifei froze. His initial urge to act stopped. He knew that Chu Li was pretending to be weak on purpose. If he fell for it and thought that it was a good opportunity to hit him when he was down, then it would be terrible. The consequences would be unpredictable, and it would also give the younger generation an ungrateful image. As an emperor, He had to step on all restraints. Morality and emotions must be cast aside. There is only profit and profit. A true emperor would not care about family. However, he had to conceal his true feelings, otherwise, he would be deserted by his friends and family. Chu Li smiled and looked at him. Senior Lung, do you know where these people came from? The Zheng dynasty's celestial beings. Lung Zhifei took a deep breath and said coldly, they want to assassinate King Ping. King Ping knows his soldiers. It's obvious why they want to kill King Ping. Sigh. Lung Shoren said, are they going to attack us? Well, they definitely have to use troops. Lung Zhifei nodded slowly. Otherwise, they can just assassinate me or you. Attack. Lung Shoren's expression changed. Lung Zhifei glanced at him. Why are you afraid of using troops? A war between two countries is inevitable. As an emperor, you should treat it as a good opportunity to build your career and expand your territory. How can you be afraid? Great ancestor, it's not that I'm afraid, it's that we have no chance of winning. Lung Shoren shook his head and smiled bitterly. The Zheng dynasty has been developing in silence. Although there have been some conflicts with the Qiu dynasty, they haven't fought. No matter how the Fu dynasty instigated it, it was useless. It seems like the Zheng dynasty's emperor is a powerful figure. Lung Zhifei nodded. He now understood the situation after his death. The Fu dynasty was the sole power. They used the art of balance to control the four countries. They had been manipulating them to fight endlessly and weaken their strength so that they could not pose a threat to him and could not unite. The Zheng dynasty is full of mysteries. Lung Shoren said, it's very scary. It's better not to fight. Moreover, Chu Li has just killed Tang Su and the Fu dynasty's emperor has just ascended the throne. He should be at his weakest. You want to go against the Fu dynasty? Lung Zhifei frowned. Lung Shoren nodded. This is the best chance. Lung Zhifei looked at Chu Li and said, what about Goddess Attraction Mountain? Can you deal with Immortal Attraction Mountain? I don't think Chu Li will intervene in this matter, right? Lung Shoren asked. Chu Li smiled faintly. I'm a disciple of Goddess Attraction Mountain. I can't disobey my master's orders. I'm afraid I'll have to offend him when the time comes. The world is in chaos, so your majesty should calm down. It's not that easy to take chestnuts out of the fire. If that's the case, then we can only give up. Lung Shoren glared at Chu Li in dissatisfaction. Chu Li said, it's best not to get into a fight. Lung Zhifei said faintly, the Fu dynasty isn't that easy to deal with. You should just give up. Yes. Lung Shoren nodded helplessly. Chu Li said, it's better to stay still and not move. It's better for His Majesty to give up on the idea of sending troops elsewhere. Lung Shoren remained silent. Chu Li shook his head and looked at Lung Zhifei. The ones who came to assassinate your Royal Highness are the Zheng dynasty's celestial beings. Senior Lung should know what the celestial beings are thinking. They have ulterior motives. I wonder if Senior is on the celestial beings' side or the Ji dynasty's side. Of course it's the Ji dynasty, Lung Zhifei said in a low voice. Everything is for the Ji dynasty. Chu Li said with a faint smile. I don't think so. What are you trying to say? Lung Zhifei frowned and looked at him. If you say that I have ulterior motives and want more people to die, then it's too ridiculous. It's better not to say it out loud and make people laugh. Chu Li said, it's not appropriate for the Ji dynasty and the Zheng dynasty to send troops now. Lung Zhifei scoffed. If that's the case, you're not going to help? Yes. Chu Li nodded. Lung Zhifei sighed and shook his head. If that's the case, I'll take my leave first. After he finished speaking, he suddenly disappeared without a trace. Lung Shoren followed closely behind. He glanced at King Ping before stepping into the void and disappearing. King Ping's injuries had mostly healed. He was talking with Chu Li in his bedroom. Chu Li sighed. Your Royal Highness, I think the elder ancestor wants to send troops. Yes. King Ping reclined on the bed with a brocade robe in his arms. His face was still pale and his eyes were dull. He sighed. The elder ancestor has always wanted the Ji dynasty to become stronger. He thinks that it's a good time to act in troubled times. Chu Li said, the situation is unclear now. If we suddenly fall into a war, I'm afraid the Ji dynasty will be surrounded by enemies. It'll be unimaginable. It's better to play it safe. Unfortunately, the elder ancestor wants to take the risk. King Ping sighed. I don't think my brother can dissuade the elder ancestor. Your elder ancestor is a celestial being, Chu Li said. King Ping was stunned and fell into deep thought. Chu Li said, these celestial beings came with a mission. If they can complete it, they'll be rewarded handsomely. It's said that the Outland's reward is very generous and can change their fate. That's why these celestial beings are working so hard. King Ping frowned. The elder ancestor can't be? Even if it's not for the celestial being's mission, there must be some influence in the depths of their hearts. This influence is enough. Chu Li said, that's why your Royal Highness should have a good talk with His Majesty and persuade him not to let your elder ancestor act recklessly. Sigh. King Ping smiled bitterly. My brother can't stop the elder ancestor's decision. Are we just going to mess around with the Ji dynasty? Chu Li frowned. Once the war breaks out, the people who die are innocent. If we lose, the Fu dynasty might not mediate. They might even take the opportunity to destroy the Ji dynasty. King Ping frowned and pondered. He was not optimistic about the outcome of this war. The Zheng dynasty was definitely stronger than the Ji dynasty. If there were no other strong reinforcements, it would be difficult for the Ji dynasty to win. Although there were ways to win by surprise, more often than not, it was a head-on confrontation. Most of the time, the outcome of a war was decided outside of the battlefield. Chu Li said, he's a celestial being now. He might not be that concerned about the Ji dynasty. What he cares about is the Lung clan's interests in the Outland. He won't really care about the interests of this world. All right, I'll persuade my brother. King Ping nodded slowly. He was moved by Chu Li's words. The elder ancestor's celestial being had determined that he would indeed care more about the Lung clan's interests in the Outland. It was too unfair that he did not care about the interests of this world. Chu Li sighed in relief and smiled. The celestial beings wanted chaos to come. Chaos would stimulate people's potential and allow them to enter the Grandmaster's boundary faster. However, chaos would also cause many wars. Grandmasters would also fall quickly and enter the Grandmaster's boundary. This was taking away the foundation of this world to strengthen the Outland. Although it was to deal with the Azura boundary, it did not benefit this world at all. As a person of this world, he naturally did not want to be so selfless and allow the Outland to do whatever it wanted. He bid farewell to King Ping's imperial residence. Lu Yurong did not return to Goddess Attraction Mountain. Instead, she returned to the Rim Public House. She was homesick after leaving the High Duke's public house for so long. She wanted to stay in the High Duke's public house for a while before returning to Goddess Attraction Mountain. When Chu Li saw this, he brought Xiao Qi and Xiao Shi back to the Yi public house. They had been away from the High Duke's public house for some time. Meanwhile, Pang Shiji practiced his swordsmanship on Goddess Attraction Mountain. In the early morning, he was cultivating in the courtyard when Shui Ling's white clothes fluttered in, accompanied by a faint fragrance. Chapter 1830. Chu Li's face darkened. A declaration of war. Shui nodded. A declaration of war. I heard that the Tiger Tally has been issued. The Emperor will personally lead the army, and King Ping will be the vanguard. Heh, a declaration of war. Chu Li shook his head and sighed. He was slightly disappointed. It seemed that King Ping did not manage to convince Lung Shoren, or rather, Lung Shoren could not withstand the pressure from Lung Zhifei and could only listen to him. This was the worst situation. He had already threatened Lung Zhifei not to declare war, but he did not care. It seemed that Lung Zhifei was determined to drag the great Ji dynasty into this. Once the war started, the people would be the most unfortunate. Lung Zhifei could still return to the Grandmaster's boundary, no matter how big the mess here was. Shui sighed. The imperial household wants to mobilize people from the 12 public houses to participate in the war. Once the imperial household gives the order, each public house must send 3 grandmasters to serve. This is the rule of the public houses. Chu Li frowned. He had a bad feeling. Does the public houses decide who to go or the imperial household? The imperial household, Shui said softly, hesitating to speak. Chu Li scoffed. They won't send me there, right? Yes. Shui nodded and said helplessly, You are one of the three. The other two are the second young master and the third lady. Anyone can be mobilized? Chu Li frowned. Shui said, As long as it's a grandmaster, no one in the public house can refuse, not even the eldest young master. Chu Li scoffed. How domineering. Shui quickly nodded. Master, do you want to refuse? Master, you're a disciple of Goddess Attraction Mountain. Logically, you don't belong to the Great Ji Dynasty. There's really no need for you to serve the Great Ji Dynasty. It's better to go to the battlefield. Chu Li sighed and shook his head. I cannot be a citizen of the Great Ji Dynasty, but I can't not be a member of the public house. Shui pursed her lips and nodded without saying a word. She knew how Chu Li felt about the public house. The public house was his root, his home. He could not betray or leave. Chu Li paced with his hands behind his back. He slowly walked out of the courtyard and walked along the cobblestone path on the island. Unknowingly, the small island had undergone a great change. Everything had changed, but he could not feel it. At this moment, with his complicated feelings, he suddenly realized that the small island had been modified by Shui Ling to be extremely exquisite. Shui Ling spent almost all of her time on this small island. She would either read the scrolls of the glories will institute or find someone to modify the island. Slowly, it became what it was today. Every blade of grass and every tree revealed Shui Ling's painstaking efforts. Shui Ling blindly followed behind him. The two of them walked around the island and returned to the courtyard. Master, are you really going to the battlefield? Shui Ling frowned. Chu Li asked, Shui Ling, what do you think? Shui shook her head lightly and said, I don't think the key to this matter is going to the battlefield. It doesn't matter to you, Master. Now that Chu Li was the world's #1 master, he had an awe-inspiring reputation. She felt very confident. When she walked in the public house, none of the protectors dared to look down on her. They were all polite to her, even when she was walking on the streets of Chongming Town. All of this was thanks to her young master. She was proud and felt that no one would be a threat to her young master, so it didn't matter whether he went to the battlefield or not. The one who died would definitely be someone else. Chu Li smiled and said, Continue. The key is the royal order. Shui Ling frowned and said, Master, you can't follow the royal order. Otherwise, there will be a second time. The emperor will definitely take advantage of you. He can't order you alone, so he will use the public house to threaten you. Chu Li said, Then what should I do? Leave the public house? Master, you will definitely not agree. Shui Ling shook her head and said, But Master, you can look for the emperor. Although the emperor is an enlightened master, he can't defeat Master. Just teach him a good lesson. If he dares to do anything rash, then teach him a good lesson. Let's see if he can withstand the beating. She knew that Chu Li would definitely not leave the public house. Not to mention the influence of the madam. More importantly, he was someone who cherished old friendships. Every time he came back, he would go to the East Garden to drink and chat with Li Yu. Things in the world were both simple and complicated. The complicated part was that people's hearts were complicated and unpredictable. The simple part was that the strong were respected. Her young master's martial arts was the best in the world. If that was the case, then he had the right to do whatever he wanted. He was not someone the emperor could order. Chu Li chuckled. Shui Ling's thoughts coincided with his. She really did want to teach Long Shoren a lesson. This matter could not be started. Otherwise, there would be endless trouble. The public house was here. Even with the protection of his formation, it could not be flawless. After all, there were many protectors in the public house. Moreover, there were protectors who went out to work every day. It was easy for outsiders to attack the public house, especially Celestials. They all knew that he valued the public house. That was why they did not dare to simply cause trouble for fear of revenge. However, once they saw that Chu Li accepted the transfer order because of the public house, they would be like wolves that smelled blood. They would use the public house to threaten him. If that happened, not only would he be in trouble, but the public house would also be in grave danger. Shui Ling frowned and said, But this matter is not that easy. If Master does not comply with the imperial edict, the public house will be punished. Moreover, this matter has already spread to the world. Once the emperor has spoken, it cannot be changed, especially at a time like this. If Master could refuse the imperial edict and force the emperor to change his order, then the other public houses would not be willing to accept it. If that was the case, wouldn't the dignity of the imperial family be lost? The emperor would not allow it. Even if they were to be taught a lesson, they would have to endure it. Chu Li nodded. Shui Ling sighed and said, "So it seems that Master only has one choice. Even if you beat the emperor up, it will be useless." Chu Li said, "I have to try." Shui Ling nodded hard. She hated the emperor and wanted Chu Li to teach him a lesson. The imperial garden of the imperial Housia, bright moon hung in the sky. The moonlight was like a veil, shrouding everything. Everything seemed hazy and beautiful. The imperial garden was brightly lit. Lung Shorin and Lung Zhifei were sitting in the gazebo, discussing the deployment of troops. "Elder Ancestor, I feel that it is not appropriate to send troops so rashly." Lung Shorin was dressed in a bright yellow robe. Under the light, he looked noble. However, his expression was solemn and hesitant as he stared at Lung Zhifei. "King Ping," Lung Shouqian's words echoed in his ears. He did not want to think about it, but he could not help but think that the elder ancestor was a celestial after all. He might not really care about the Ji dynasty wholeheartedly. It was better to be cautious. Moreover, King Ping had admitted that even if they sent troops, they had no chance of winning. They would most likely lose. Even if King Ping's military strategy was brilliant, he could not rely on luck because the Zheng dynasty also had a genius in the art of war who was not inferior to him. Lung Shorin was a little hesitant, but he could not dissuade the determined Lung Zhifei. Lung Zhifei stared at him coldly, declining before the battle. "You're really useless as an emperor. Elder Ancestor, the Zheng dynasty's strength is indeed higher than ours," Lung Shorin said. "So what?" Lung Zhifei scoffed. "We killed many of their celestials last time. The celestials of the Zheng dynasty's imperial family are probably all dead. When the time comes, I will personally deal with the Zheng dynasty's emperor." But Lung Shorin frowned. Although he wanted to object, the elder ancestor's prestige was too high. He had always been wise and powerful. Lung Shorin was far inferior to him, so he did not have the confidence to refute. Chapter 1831. Lung Zhifei scoffed. "What buts?" Lung Shorin said, "Elder Ancestor, I'm worried about Chu Li. If we treat him like this, he'll definitely be angered. Will he come here and even kill me?" "Hey, you're really—" Lung Zhifei shook his head and sighed. "You're such a bad judge of character." Lung Shorin felt awkward, but his expression remained calm. He fist saluted. "Elder Ancestor, please guide me. I think this is a dangerous step. I know a little about Chu Li. He's stubborn and unyielding. He may seem easygoing, but he's actually very stubborn and will never obey orders. This step will definitely anger him. He won't even blink when he kills the other emperors. Chun Jinji of the Qiu dynasty and 2 emperors of the Fu dynasty died in his hands. I will make a difference. How can you compare to the emperors of the Zheng dynasty and Fu dynasty?" Lung Zhifei said snappily. "You're the emperor of the Ji dynasty, and he's a citizen of the Ji dynasty." Lung Shorin pondered. Lung Zhifei said, "He killed the emperors of the Qiu dynasty and Fu dynasty. The people of the Ji dynasty cheered and saw him as a hero. However, if he kills you, he'll be a traitor. He'll be cursed for the rest of his life." Lung Shorin nodded slowly. Then he shook his head. "That's true, but he's no longer in the Ji dynasty. He belongs to Goddess Attraction Mountain and belongs to the Fu dynasty. He might not care about such empty titles. At his level, empty titles don't matter anymore. This is the first obstacle." Lung Zhifei raised his left index finger. "The second obstacle is feelings. You've noticed that he's the sentimental person." "Yes." Lung Shorin nodded. "He's a sentimental person indeed." There was a hint of disdain in his tone. As a person who did not care about sentiments, he was naturally repulsed by sentimental people. Their existence seemed to serve as a foil to his ruthlessness and cruelty. It was truly displeasing. Lung Zhifei raised his left middle finger and said coldly, "Sentimental people are the weakest and easiest to manipulate. as long as we hold on to what he values. So what if he's the best in martial arts? He has martial arts, but he can't use it. He's trapped by his emotions. He glanced at Lung Shoren coldly. Lung Shoren furrowed his brows and said, I know that he values the house of High Duke the most because he was born there, and it's also his wife's home. That's right. Lung Zhifei scoffed and said, as long as we control the house of High Dukes, he won't be able to escape from us. Even if we have to teach you a lesson, we won't kill you. At most, we'll just teach you a lesson. Lung Shoren let out a bitter smile, his heart palpitating. He did not want to experience Chu Li's torture again. It was worse than death, and the mere thought of it sent chills down his spine. Lung Zhifei said, don't worry, I'm here. I won't allow him to torture you. Sigh. Lung Shoren sighed. Lung Zhifei said, he has 2 wives, right? 2 wives are 2 shackles, and with the addition of King An's imperial residence, that's 3 shackles. There's also the burden of his original reputation, so that's 4 shackles. Under these 4 shackles, it'll be very difficult for him to break free and make up his mind to kill you. Ancestor, Lung Shoren smiled bitterly. Last time, I knew he wanted to kill me. That's because you touched his reverse scale. Lung Zhifei scoffed and said, this shows how much he values relationships. He's willing to kill for them, and he's willing to suffer for them. Trust me, he'll definitely listen to your orders. Lung Shoren still had no confidence. He felt that Chu Li would not give in so easily. Clap, 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 clap. Applause suddenly rang out. Lung Zhifei and Lung Shoren immediately turned their heads and looked around, trying to find the source of the sound. However, the surroundings were filled with flowers. The exotic flowers and plants were full of life under the daytime light, but there was no sign of anyone. The 2 of them leaped into the void and looked down at the entire Imperial Garden. The Imperial Garden was empty. There was not a single Imperial maid. They had all been chased out to prevent them from listening to their discussion. Are the 2 of you looking for me? Chu Li suddenly appeared in front of them. It was as if there was a door in the void. He pushed the door open and took a step forward. Chu Li, Lung Shoren shuddered and sighed to himself. He finally came looking for him. He could not help but recall the situation when he was attacked by the Thunder Sword of God. His body trembled uncontrollably, and he could not help but want to escape. Lung Zhifei scoffed. Chu Li, are you here for the conscription? Chu Li shook his head. I'd like to ask, Elder Ancestor, why did you declare war on the Zheng dynasty? For the prosperity of the Ji dynasty, of course. Lung Zhifei scoffed. Chu Li could not help but laugh as he shook his head. Elder Ancestor, do you think I'm a 3-year-old? How dare you say such deceitful words? Although the Zheng dynasty is strong, almost all of their celestials have been killed. It's a good opportunity to take advantage of the situation. Lung Zhifei said. Moreover, I've already made an agreement with the Qiu dynasty's imperial family to send troops together. Chu Li raised his eyebrows. The Qiu dynasty? Qin Chang Mao? Yes. Lung Zhifei said. Do you think I'm a 3-year-old who would treat the Ji dynasty as a game if I'm not confident of winning? Chu Li shook his head disapprovingly. If the Qiu dynasty joins forces with you, what about the Fu dynasty and the Li dynasty? One word from the Fu dynasty and the Qiu dynasty will immediately become your enemy. There's also the Li dynasty. Will they take the opportunity to join forces with the Zheng dynasty to attack the Ji dynasty? Lung Zhifei smiled. The Li dynasty. They have you, Chu Li. Chu Li frowned. Lung Zhifei said, I know you have a good relationship with the Bishop of the Holy Church of Light. The Bishop of the Holy Church of Light has great influence on the Li dynasty. As long as she says the word, the Li dynasty won't make a move. As for the Fu dynasty, they can't even fend for themselves now. Moreover, there's Goddess Attraction Mountain. The Fu dynasty's imperial family is weak, while the Goddess Attraction Mountain is strong. As long as the Goddess Attraction Mountain doesn't say anything, the Fu dynasty won't make a move. As long as you join the Ji dynasty's army, the Ji dynasty will definitely win. Chu Li, as a disciple of the Ji dynasty, you won't object, right? Moreover, we're just borrowing your name. You don't have to do anything. Chu Li said coldly. Elder Ancestor, you're really scheming. Lung Zhifei smiled calmly. Everything is for the Ji dynasty and the people of the Ji dynasty. Chu Li said, then I'll tell you, elder ancestor. Although I have a good relationship with the bishop of the Holy Church of Light, personal feelings don't matter when the country is at stake. If the Ji dynasty sends troops, the Li dynasty will definitely take advantage of the situation. Lung Zhifei frowned. Chu Li scoffed. As for Goddess Attraction Mountain, that's a joke. Goddess Attraction Mountain doesn't care about worldly affairs. No matter how weak the Fu dynasty's imperial family is, Goddess Attraction Mountain won't suppress them. They'll only support them. Moreover, I'm only a disciple of Goddess Attraction Mountain, and my master is above me. The Fu dynasty's imperial family will never allow the Ji dynasty to take advantage of the situation. The Qiu dynasty isn't reliable at all. Even if there's a celestial being there to suppress them, it'll be useless. It's not like the Fu dynasty doesn't have a celestial being. That was then, and this was now. Back then, he was dissatisfied with the Fu dynasty's tyrannical and shameless behavior. He wanted to overthrow the Fu dynasty's rule, but now he wanted to maintain the original situation. He did not want any more variables to prevent the people from being plunged into misery and suffering. So, Chu Li, you don't want to help? Lung Zhifei's eyes flashed like lightning. Chu Li said slowly, forgive me for my incompetence. Please retract your order. Chapter 1832. Unfortunately, he was a celestial being and was born at the wrong time. At this time, even if he was talented, bold, and wise, it was better to keep it to himself. In a situation where celestials and Azuras were rampaging, stability was the priority and fewer people would die as much as possible. If it was before the celestials descended, he would have supported them wholeheartedly and overthrown the Fu dynasty's rule. Now, however, it was the complete opposite. Not only did he not support it, but he also opposed it and wanted to dispel his thoughts of sending troops. Lung Zhifei narrowed his eyes. The electricity in his eyes intensified as his thoughts raced. The fact that Chu Li was able to stay in the vicinity without him noticing meant that Chu Li's cultivation level was slightly higher than his. If it was someone else, he would be able to gain the upper hand with his soul-tracking palm and defeat someone stronger than him. However, the soul-tracking palm was ineffective against Chu Li. If they really fought, he might not be Chu Li's match. I've already declared war. How can I take it back? Lung Zhifei took a deep breath and shook his head. He declared war in advance to stop those who opposed it. Most of the 12 High Dukes' public houses and the courtiers were against sending troops because the Zheng dynasty was not weak. Even if they could win, it would be a bitter battle and the Li dynasty would take advantage of it. Chu Li frowned and said, the war hasn't started yet. Why can't I take it back? Great ancestor, are you really going to disregard the people of the world for your own selfishness and turn the Ji dynasty into hell on earth? To this world, hell was the next level. To the sky beyond heaven, the world he was in was hell. That was why the Celestials did not care about this place. They were not afraid of destruction and killed wantonly, all for the sake of increasing the power of the sky beyond heaven. Lung Zhifei said, Chu Li, how about this? I'll take a step back. Chu Li looked at him coldly. Lung Zhifei said, as long as you help me once, I won't conscript you. What do you think? Chu Li shook his head. What he wanted was not only to not conscript him, but to stop the war. Lung Zhifei said, as long as you assassinate the Zheng dynasty's emperor, I won't conscript you anymore. Even the people from Yi Public House and the Rin Public House can stay out of the war. Chu Li sneered. Lung Zhifei said, although killing the emperor of the Zheng dynasty will not cause chaos in the country, it will be enough to weaken them. Moreover, it will deal a huge blow to their confidence and also intimidate the rulers of the other countries. In this way, the Ji dynasty will definitely win. You don't have to worry about the suffering of the people if the Ji dynasty loses. Saving the people from disaster is a great merit. Why not? Chu Li scoffed and said, great ancestor, you should stop your wishful thinking. Chu Li, Lung Zhifei was slightly annoyed. Even if you're the #1 master in the world, You're just a boorish fellow who can't see the bigger picture. Do you think that the other countries will let us off just because the Ji dynasty didn't declare war? Chu Li frowned. He immediately understood Lung Zhifei's plan. If Chu Li did not agree, Lung Zhifei could retract his order, but he would find a way to make the Zheng dynasty declare war and attack the Ji dynasty. In this case, Chu Li could only help. This was not difficult for Lung Zhifei. They were both celestials, so they must be connected. All he had to do was collude with the celestials of the Zheng dynasty. Lung Zhifei scoffed. In this world, if you don't kill, others will kill you. So the best way to protect yourself is to take the initiative and attack. Don't wait for the other countries to declare war on us. We can win the initiative and morale by declaring war first. Chaos is coming, and no one can stop this trend. Even if you're the #1 master in the world, you can't stop it. Chu Li said, "Isn't it all because of you celestials? Kill all the celestials and see if there's still chaos in the world." Chu Li's expression was calm and his tone was indifferent, but it sent a chill down Lung Zhifei's spine. It was obvious that Chu Li was determined. If he really did this, it would be a disaster for the celestials. The celestials paid a huge price to come here with an important mission. If they could not complete the mission and return to the Outland, it would be a great blow to the celestials and their sects and forces. Lung Zhifei frowned. Chu Li, aren't you going to ascend to the Outland? What's so good about the Outland? Chu Li shook his head. Although this world isn't perfect, it's wonderful enough. It's good to stay here. Lung Zhifei said, "This world is like the bottom of a well. Do you want to be a frog and not jump out to see the wider world? The Outland is 1,000 times bigger than this world. It's rich in spiritual energy and has more beautiful sceneries. It's easy to live for 10,000 years, but in this world..." He shook his head as he spoke. Comparing this world to the Outland was like comparing a desolate village in the countryside to Fairy's capital. Why would the people in Fairy's capital want to live in a remote and desolate village? It was worse than death. Chu Li smiled. The Outland was beautiful, but he did not have his woman or his relatives there. Why would he go there? If he could condense the Chakram Pagoda in his body, even if Shao Qi and the others could not become enlightened masters, they would not need to ascend to the Outland after they died. He could save them and reincarnate. How wonderful would that be? Therefore, he had the confidence to ignore the Outland and kill all the Celestials. He was not going to the Outland anyway, so he was not afraid of offending the sects in the Outland. It was fine as long as he could stay in this world. Chu Li, are you really not going to help? Lung Zhifei asked. Chu Li replied, "If the elder ancestor really sends his troops, I'll have no choice but to fight back and send you to heaven." All right. Lung Zhifei gritted his teeth and sneered. He nodded. As expected of the world's #1 master, Chu Li asked, "Has the elder ancestor made a decision?" As he spoke, his white robe fluttered and he slowly released his aura. The heaven god's field pressed down on Lung Zhifei and Lung Shoren's heads like a mountain. Lung Zhifei said, "If you kill me, the Zheng dynasty will definitely take advantage of the situation. Shoren won't be able to stop them. Even if you're the world's #1 master, you're not good at politics and battle formations. You won't be able to stop the Zheng dynasty. So, I can't touch the elder ancestor." Chu Li laughed and lightly struck out with his palm. A golden light fell from the sky and shot directly at Lung Zhifei. It turned into a golden palm print in front of him and shot down like a meteor, reaching him in a flash. Lung Zhifei scoffed angrily. He did not expect Chu Li to really attack him. Lung Shoren was about to step forward and stop him when he saw Chu Li's azure blue eyes flash. He could not help but take a step back. He immediately remembered that he already had a treasure to protect himself and could block Chu Li's strange attack. Thus, he took another step forward and scoffed. "Chu Li, don't be rude." Chu Li said, "It seems that your majesty has something up your sleeve. Let's try it." As soon as he finished speaking, he shot out the god-punishing thunder sword. At the same time, he struck out with both palms. 2 golden lights fell on Lung Zhifei, forcing him to take it head-on. The Supreme Vajra palm was too fast, so he could not use the soul pursuit palm against Chu Li. Bang! Lung Shorin took a step back, and a golden light flashed on his wrist. Chu Li raised an eyebrow. Vajrasarira? It was strange that the Vajrasarira from the Titanium Temple was in his hands. Lung Shorin calmed down and said, Chu Li, as a subject of the Ji dynasty, you dare to kill the late emperor? Why not? Chu Li said, Is the emperor tired of living? Wouldn't it be better to give you a piece of heaven and let King Ping be the emperor? You. Lung Shorin's expression changed. Chu Li said, That's why your majesty better not force me to kill you. Chapter 1833. He was extremely dissatisfied with Lung Shorin as the emperor. Lung Shorin was proficient in government affairs and had the support of all the ministers in the court. The relationship between the emperor and his ministers was harmonious, which was a rare sight to behold. However, Lung Shorin was soft on the inside. He might seem tough and cold, but he was only like that to outsiders. He was afraid of death and lacked the courage of a martial artist. In this aspect, he was far from King Ping, Lung Shoqian. His blood and iron were ingrained in his bones, and he disregarded life and death. This was what a wise emperor should be like. Lung Shorin took a deep breath. He was not afraid of death, but he could not stand Chu Li's methods. Bang, 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 bang. Lung Zhifei and the Supreme Vajrapalm exchanged 100 blows in the blink of an eye. However, the flowers and plants around them did not move at all. Unlike other enlightened masters who fought earth-shattering and destructive battles, nothing was left intact. The enlightened master's energy was pure and overbearing, and almost nothing could stop it. Chu Li's Supreme Vajrapalm was pure and restrained as if it was solid. Even if it was shattered, it would not lose its purity and would not scatter in all directions to hurt the people around it. Instead, it would turn into pure spiritual energy and be absorbed by Chu Li. After 100 blows, Chu Li's expression did not change as he looked at Lung Shorin. Your Majesty, how did you get this Vajra relic? The relics left behind by the Titanium Temple's eminent monks were extremely precious, especially to the Titanium Temple's disciples. They could use the relics to enhance their understanding of divine powers and save a lot of time. Therefore, Vajra relics were rarely circulated outside unless they were gifted by the Titanium Temple, like his own Vajra relic. This belongs to me. Lung Zhifei scoffed. Chu Li raised his eyebrows. Lung Zhifei said, I got this Vajra relic from a monk from the Titanium Temple. Chu Li raised his eyebrows and smiled. Anything that can make a master from the Titanium Temple trade is definitely not ordinary. As he spoke, he attacked with his palms as if he was chatting or sparring with friends, concealing his murderous intent. Lung Zhifei looked like he had time to spare as he waved both of his palms to block every single Supreme Vajrapalm. He knew that Chu Li was planning to deplete his inner energy, and that was exactly what he was planning to do. Since he was still a Deva, he had an exceptional affinity with the spiritual energy of the Outland. That was why his spiritual energy decreased at an exceptionally fast pace, and his inner energy recovered at an exceptionally fast pace. This was a unique advantage. Even if his cultivation level was slightly lower than Chu Li's, he could still overtake Chu Li with this advantage. As long as they continued fighting like this, the longer the battle dragged on, the more obvious his advantage would be. By the time Chu Li felt that he was no match for him and wanted to escape, it would be too late. Then he would have to use his trump card to defeat his enemy in one fell swoop and kill Chu Li. When he thought of this, he felt inexplicably excited. Then he became vigilant and did not let himself get carried away. Everything was still unknown, and Chu Li was unusually cunning. For all he knew, Chu Li might escape midway if he saw that the situation was not good, so he had to talk to him to numb him. With this thought in mind, Lung Zhifei said in a deep voice, The transaction is in the area where the Titanium Temple is located. A string of titanium Sarira prayer beads in exchange for the boundary of the Titanium Temple. Chu Li asked. Lung Zhifei said, Everything within a 1,000-mile radius of the Titanium Temple is their boundary. I'm very sincere, so the monks of the Titanium Temple can't refuse. 1,000-mile radius in exchange for a string of titanium sarira. The elder ancestor is still the one who's profiting. Chu Li shook his head. To people outside of the Titanium Temple, the magical effect of the titanium sarira was to protect their minds and prevent them from being invaded by external evils. It could calm their bodies and minds, allowing them to achieve twice the results with half the effort during cultivation. To people in the martial arts world, it was indeed very important, as it could save them a lot of time and allow them to become a master at a younger age. However, compared to the monks of the Titanium Temple, they could use it to cultivate divine powers. Lung Zhifei said faintly, "There's also my promise. As long as the Ji dynasty exists, the Titanium Temple will be outside of the law and will not be under the jurisdiction of the Ji dynasty." I see. Chu Li nodded slowly. If that was the case, then it would make sense. The 10 lifetimes of Buddhahood cultivated by the Titanium Temple originally disregarded the laws of the world. It emphasized on the heart to be like a bright pearl and shine brightly. It was stained by the dust of the secular world and needed to be washed away bit by bit. Then, it would regain its brilliance and illuminate the world. Lung Zhifei said, "Chu Li, if you can lend me a hand and help the Ji dynasty win, I can make the decision to promote the High Duke's public house to the imperial residence. The title will be hereditary and the nobility will never be lowered. As long as the Ji dynasty exists, the Lung family will rule the country. The boundary of Yi public house will be a country within a country. It will not be under the jurisdiction of the Ji dynasty and will only belong to the Ji dynasty in name." Chu Li was stunned and fell into deep thought. This was indeed a great temptation. If they could really achieve this, it would be a dream come true for the High Duke's public house. The status of the High Duke's public house was quite high, but it was still the High Duke's public house and had to listen to the imperial family. Just like this conscription order, they could only obey it obediently and could not refuse or defy it. This was difficult for the High Duke's public house, who had always been a local tyrant. To the first High Duke, it might be reasonable. After all, the power of the High Duke's public house came from the imperial family. However, after a few generations, the masters of the High Duke's public house would have other thoughts. They felt that the High Duke's public house was already very benevolent to the imperial family by guarding the area. They would not be willing to obey orders unconditionally. If they could be promoted from the High Duke's public house to the imperial residence, they would be completely independent and would no longer have to listen to the imperial family. A country within a country would indeed be free from the shackles and be free. From then on, the High Duke's public house would be no different than a small court. This was too great a temptation for the High Duke's public house. It was an irresistible temptation. Lung Zhifei saw that Chu Li was tempted and quickly said, "But there's one condition. If the High Duke's public house is attacked by external enemies, the Ji dynasty will not help." Chu Li smiled. This was Lung Zhifei expressing his sincerity. Without this condition, if the Yi public house was attacked, the Ji dynasty would send troops to help. There were too many tricks, and it would make the Yi public house restless. After all, if any force were to attack the High Duke's public house, the Ji dynasty could legitimately enter the Yi public house's territory. Lung Zhifei said, "What do you think?" Chu Li pondered for a while and finally took a deep breath. He shook his head and said no. Lung Zhifei was surprised. "You didn't discuss with the High Duke's public house or the madam. Aren't you afraid that they will blame you if they find out? Even if they blame me, there's nothing I can do. Has the elder ancestor decided to send troops?" Chu Li said lightly. "I'm not willing," Lung Zhifei scoffed. "Chu Li, you're too naive. Do you really think that you're thinking for the people of the world? Let me tell you, if there aren't enough grandmasters ascending to heaven, the grandmaster will not give up." "Then let's give it a try," Chu Li said lightly. "It seems that the elder ancestor wants to ascend to heaven." How arrogant. Lung Zhifei shook his head. He felt that Chu Li's inner energy was almost depleted and that he could gain the upper hand. He decided to use his trump card to prevent Chu Li from escaping. Thus, his body suddenly grew a lot bigger, and his loose clothes immediately fit his body. Suddenly, a vast spiritual energy surged down. His hair danced in the wind, and both of his palms suddenly expanded. He lightly slapped his palms down. This palm seemed to break through the void and instantly reached Chu Li's chest. Chu Li faced the palm. Bam! He only felt a sharp inner energy drilling into his palm. It was about to break the supreme, indestructible physique. Chu Li frowned. This palm energy was strange. The palm was obviously huge, but the palm energy was not thick but sharp. Chapter 1834. Chu Li frowned and suddenly pressed his left hand on the hilt of the Sky Killing Sword. When the Sky Killing Sword was activated, his body became as sharp as the Sky Killing Sword. It was indestructible and unbreakable. The originally swift and fierce palm energy was instantly broken. Chu Li slowly discovered the wonders of the Sky Killing script. It was not only good for offense, but also for defense. It also had many other uses. As long as one could think of it, its power was not limited to killing. Lung Zhifei then slapped Chu Li's chest. This palm was fast, accurate, and unpredictable. Chu Li did not even have time to think before he was hit. It was obviously some kind of secret skill that activated his potential. This kind of palm energy could not be used more than a few times. Lung Zhifei smiled. Not only did he know the soul-chasing palm, but he also knew the heart-destroying palm. This kind of palm attack was aimed directly at the heart and was unstoppable. Anyone who was hit by this heart-destroying palm would eventually have their heart turned into minced meat, unable to form a new shape and dead. As long as one was a human, even a celestial would die if their heart was crushed. No matter how strong and pure the inner energy was, without the power of the heart, the body would quickly wither and the inner energy would disappear as well. Even if Chu Li was the world's #1 master, he would definitely die after being hit by his heart destruction palm. However, Chu Li looked at him calmly and did not move. He allowed his right palm to press on his chest. After a few breaths, he felt that Chu Li was already dead. However, Chu Li's body was still emitting the enlightened master's field. It surged like a huge wave and pressed against him, forcing him to use all his energy. Chu Li shook his head. This palm technique is really good. Lung Zhifei's expression changed. He suddenly felt that he was ridiculous. He thought he could destroy Chu Li's trump card, but it did not affect him at all. Chu Li's strength was beyond his imagination. Chu Li said, "This heart destruction palm is really mysterious. I have learned it before, but unfortunately, I did not have such a high level of mastery. However, if this is all you have, you should go to heaven," he said as he slowly pulled out his sword. "Wait!" Lung Shoren shouted. Chu Li looked at him. Lung Shoren said, "Fine, I agree to withdraw the declaration of war." "Shut up!" Lung Zhifei shouted. Lung Shoren said, "Elder, at this point, it is better to withdraw. If we withdraw, what will become of our Lung family?" Lung Zhifei snorted. "Won't we become the laughingstock of the world? Then tell me the truth. It was Chu Li who forced me." Lung Shoren said, "Chu Li, if I withdraw the declaration of war, you will no longer interfere with the affairs of the imperial family. Can you promise me that? Otherwise, we will fight to the death." Chu Li shook his head. "Your Majesty, forgive me for not being able to agree. The matters of the imperial family often involve the imperial residence of King, and as the head chief of the imperial residence of King Yin, how can I not care about it? Moreover, the High Duke's public house is also involved." "All right, very well." Lung Shoren gritted his teeth and said coldly, "It seems like you are forcing me to use my last resort." Chu Li smiled and said, "Your Majesty, if you want to deal with the High Duke's public house, you should save your energy. Even though I died, I left behind a will." Lung Shoren said slowly, "Marry Lung Qing." Chu Li's expression changed slightly. His relationship with Lung Qing was quite deep. After all, she had learned swordsmanship from him and had always been practicing in his courtyard. They had spent a lot of time together and had developed feelings for each other. Even if it was not romantic, it was enough of a friendship. Lung Shoren said, "No matter how incompetent I am, I can still influence the marriage of the imperial family." Chu Li asked, "Your Majesty, who is the daughter you want to marry?" "Zhuqingling." Lung Shoren scoffed. Chu Li frowned and said, "The Zhuqingling who killed his wife and son." He knew every minister in the Ji dynasty like the back of his hand. This was thanks to his hard work during his tenure in the Secret Guardians Hall. He had flipped through almost all the files in the Secret Guardians Hall and had a clear understanding of every minister's temperament and secrets. This Zhuqingling was tyrannical, but he was also a general who had made countless contributions. He was stationed at the border between the Zheng dynasty and the Ji dynasty. Although there was peace with the Zheng dynasty, there were still conflicts and small-scale battles. Every time, this Zhuqingling won the battle. He was an arrogant general who only obeyed King Ping and was difficult to control. He was tyrannical, especially to his own people. He often whipped his own soldiers and often whipped his wives and concubines. He even did the same to his own children. In the end, he beat his wife and one of his sons to death. However, he was strict with his troops. When something like this happened, he immediately issued a gag order. Not a single word spread, but it did not escape the all-knowing Secret Guardians Hall. If the Secret Guardians Hall knew, so did the Emperor. However, because Zhuqingling had made great contributions and could win the battle despite his shortcomings, he pretended not to know and turned a blind eye to it. Chu Li was well aware of this. He did not expect Lung Shoren to marry Lung Qing. This was equivalent to pushing Lung Qing into a pit of fire. His aura surged like raging waves. His azure blue eyes suddenly flashed. Bang! Lung Shoren staggered a step back. The titanium seraira on his wrist flashed again. Lung Shoren's expression changed, and he said, "Chu Li, it's useless even if you kill me. Once I die, this edict will be carried out. No matter how strong King An's imperial residence is, they will have to listen to me. I can't order you, but I can order King An's imperial residence." Chu Li said, "I'd like to see who dares to carry out the edict. Moreover, once you die, Your Majesty, King Ping will inherit the throne. I believe he won't follow the edict." Do you really think that the crown prince will inherit the throne after I die?" Lung Shoren shook his head and laughed. "You're too naive. After I die, Feng Heir will inherit the throne. He will definitely follow the edict even if you want to kill him." Chu Li said, "Then I'll send you and your son to heaven together." "All right, let's see if you have the guts. So what if I die once?" Lung Shoren's face darkened and he looked stern. Bang, bang, bang. Chu Li's eyes flashed with azure blue light again. Then 3 god-slaying thunder swords shot out. Lung Shoren was no longer afraid of Chu Li's swords. He smiled proudly. Chu Li scoffed. It seems that even the elder ancestor doesn't know that the titanium seraira has its limits. It can't withstand the power of the soul indefinitely. This titanium seraira has been around for too long and has suffered too much damage. It won't last long. As he spoke, he had already unsheathed the sky regal sword. Suddenly, the space around them was locked. Lung Zhifei and Lung Shoren felt an invisible force binding them. They could not move their bodies. It was as if they were tied up and sent to the chopping board to be slaughtered. It was an uncomfortable feeling. The two struggled, but to no avail. They could only watch as the sword fell. Once it fell, they would be beheaded. "Hold on, I agree." Lung Shoren shouted. "I agree to withdraw the declaration of war." He saw that Chu Li was determined. It seemed that there was no way to make him yield. Chu Li's sky regal sword suddenly stopped. It was only a foot away from Lung Shoren's face. He said, "Swear." Once an enlightened master made an oath, it would be a great oath. It was very effective, and no enlightened master would dare to violate it. "Okay, I swear." Lung Shoren gritted his teeth and was about to swear. "Shut up." Lung Zhifei roared and pounced at Chu Li to meet the sky regal sword. Chu Li squinted and flipped his sword. The blade met Lung Zhifei's attack and sent him flying. "Swear," Chu Li said, "or else this sword will be the blade." "Okay." Lung Shoren gritted his teeth and swore. Chapter 1835. Chu Li nodded calmly. Enlightened masters were different from mortals. Once they made an oath, they would be connected to heaven and earth. If they disobeyed the oath, they would be punished by lightning and would never be able to reincarnate. Lung Shoren's face darkened as he glared at Chu Li. "Are you satisfied now?" Chu Li smiled. "Don't blame me, Your Majesty. I just don't want the people to suffer. As a celestial being, I naturally want everyone to ascend to heaven. There's no need to rush." Lung Zhifei's face darkened. He scoffed and looked at Lung Shoren with disappointment. Letting the Grandmasters ascend is for the sake of the Grandmaster. Once the Grandmaster falls into the Azura's boundary, we won't be able to escape. Chu Li, you're so disregarding the bigger picture. How disappointing. Lung Shoren was not going to amount to much. If he died, he would at most return to the Grandmaster to be punished. As long as he completed his mission and let more Grandmasters ascend to heaven, he would be exempted from punishment and the Ji dynasty would be strengthened. Hence, he did not have to care about his own life. However, Lung Shoren was not calm and clear. He was swayed by his emotions and was soft-hearted. Even though it was for him, Lung Zhifei still felt disappointed and dissatisfied with Lung Shoren. He felt that it would be difficult for the ancestral foundation to be strengthened in his hands. Now that the world was in chaos, the Ji dynasty would be in danger if they met an emperor who was outwardly strong but inwardly weak. Once the oath was made, there would be no war and his mission would be difficult to complete. It would be useless even if he stayed here for a long time. Lung Shoren was useless. His heart was filled with dissatisfaction, but he suppressed it. Chu Li smiled. "Actually, there's no need to rush. Back then, there weren't many Grandmasters who could ascend to the Grandmaster's boundary. Normal Grandmasters would still have to enter the cycle of reincarnation after death. However, things have changed in the past 2 years. Every Grandmaster can ascend to heaven after death. It's obvious that the Grandmaster's boundary has relaxed its restrictions. Back then, only the Holy Church of Light and a few other sects could ascend to the Grandmaster's boundary. It was extremely rare. Normal Grandmasters would still have to enter the cycle of reincarnation after death and could not ascend to the Grandmaster's boundary. However, it was different now. It seemed like any Grandmaster who died could enter the Grandmaster's boundary. It seemed like a good thing, but it gave him a sense of danger. It was a sign of chaos. Previously, Grandmasters were not able to enter the Grandmaster's boundary because they cherished their lives. Conflicts were avoided as much as possible, especially between Grandmasters. However, now that they could enter the Grandmaster's boundary once they died, they were no longer afraid of death. Once they were not afraid of death, how could they be restrained? How many people would be able to suppress a Grandmaster who had broken free from the shackles? How could the world not be in chaos? At the end of the day, it was all a conspiracy by the Grandmasters. This made Chu Li hate the Grandmasters even more. Lung Zhifei frowned at Chu Li. Chu Li said, "Since the Grandmaster can relax its restrictions once, it can be relaxed a second time. Maybe even an innate master can enter the Grandmaster's boundary, right? When that time comes, will Realm Beyond Avalon have to worry about not having enough manpower? It's impossible to relax it to the innate realm." Lung Zhifei snorted. Chu Li chuckled and said sarcastically, "Is there anything the Grandmasters can't do?" Lung Zhifei shook his head and said, "Grandmasters can quickly recover their cultivation level if they go there, but innate masters can't. It's useless even if they go there. That's why the Grandmaster can't relax its restrictions to innate masters." Chu Li nodded thoughtfully. "That's why you Celestials want to create more Grandmasters and let more Grandmasters die. The battlefield can stimulate one's potential. In addition to the influence of military flags and military formations, one's cultivation will be faster and they will die faster. That's why you must start a war." "Nonsense." Lung Zhifei's expression did not change. He shook his head lightly. However, he felt a chill in his heart. Chu Li really lived up to his reputation of being smart. He could actually see through this. Chu Li glanced at Lung Shoren. "Your Majesty should understand this, right?" Lung Shoren nodded slowly. He knew this, but the world was in such a state. It was better to go with the flow and take the opportunity to let the Ji dynasty rise. He could also get a higher position in the Lung family of the Grandmaster's boundary. That was why he had been hesitant and did not oppose to sending troops. Chu Li sighed and shook his head. Greed has blinded me. I have nothing to say. Since your majesty has sworn, I shall take my leave. He closed fists, saluted, and glanced at Lung Zhifei before disappearing. Lung Zhifei took a deep breath to suppress his anger. His face suddenly turned pale, and his body swayed. Every time he unlocked the seal, he would lose 40 years of time in this world. The time left for him was even shorter. This was not a big deal. However, he could not do anything to Chu Li after unlocking the seal. Elder Ancestor, Lung Shoren quickly supported him. Lung Zhifei pushed his hand away. I won't die yet. Lung Shoren sighed. Elder Ancestor, do you think that I shouldn't swear? As an emperor, you're being threatened. This is a disgrace to the Lung family. Lung Zhifei sat down heavily in the gazebo and gritted his teeth. Look at Chu Li. He would rather die than be threatened. Learn from him. He originally thought that Chu Li was a sentimental person. Even as an enlightened master, he would still be affected by worldly sentiments. When he recruited the 3 people from the High Duke's public house, he would obediently agree to it. This was because Chu Li should understand his intentions. If he did not agree, he would recruit Shao Qi instead. Due to the influence of righteousness, Chu Li did not want to be cursed. Chu Li would not kill the Ji dynasty's emperor. However, he did not expect Chu Li to be so unyielding. He would rather break than bend. He came straight to his door and almost killed him. If Lung Shoren did not swear, he would really die under his sword. Chu Li's swordsmanship was too evil. Lung Shoren smiled bitterly. Elder Ancestor, he can do this because of his cultivation level. I don't have such a deep cultivation level. It's not cultivation level, it's temperament. Lung Zhifei said impatiently. If he wants to kill me, let him. I don't believe that he would dare to kill you. Aren't you afraid of his torture? That's why you gave in? Sigh. Lung Shoren shook his head. This elder ancestor was really unreasonable. Lung Zhifei glared at him. I think you shouldn't be the emperor. Let 4th brother be the emperor. He? Lung Shoren frowned and slowly shook his head. Elder ancestor, let's not talk about whether I abdicate or not. Even if I abdicate, Feng Heir will take over. King Ping's crown prince title is just to fool Chu Li. I think 4th brother is more suitable to be the emperor than you. Your son is even more useless. Lung Zhifei shook his head. Lung Shoren said in a low voice, Elder ancestor, I can listen to you on other matters, but I want to make my own decision about the succession. He had always addressed himself as I in front of Lung Zhifei and not I. This time, he addressed himself as I. It was obvious that he was putting on the airs of an emperor. Lung Zhifei narrowed his eyes, his pupils constricted. He smiled faintly and said, Have you ever thought that once someone like Lung Feng becomes a heavenly deity, he will only be ranked at the bottom amongst all the heavenly deities? I can first empower him, then pass on the throne and become an enlightened master, Lung Shoren said in a low voice. This was how he obtained the position. He had already received the secret skill that could greatly increase Lung Feng's strength. When he became an enlightened master, he would be even stronger. Although he could not become the top-notch enlightened master, he would not be at the bottom. So what? Lung Zhifei shook his head. He's not only lacking in martial arts, but also in wisdom. He's much weaker than you. Do you admit this? Lung Shoren remained silent. Lung Zhifei scoffed. You're just showing off for your own pleasure. You don't care about the great Ji dynasty or the Lung clan. You should know the consequences. I will never pass on the throne to King Ping. Lung Shoren said in a low voice. He gave a fist salute. Elder ancestor, please recuperate. I'll take my leave first. Chapter 1836. Lung Zhifei narrowed his eyes as he stared at his back. His gait was majestic, and he did have the majesty of an emperor. Unfortunately, he was a weak fellow who was afraid of pain and selfish. He only wanted to pass the throne to his son and did not care if his son was suitable or not. He sighed. How could there be such a good thing as an emperor? He had to care about the country and his family. The most ruthless of all was the imperial family. Under the rule of the country and within the imperial power, there was no possibility of personal feelings. Even an emperor had no choice but to make decisions for him. Ever since Lung Xiaoran displayed his tough stance in front of Lung Zhifei, he didn't go to see Lung Zhifei for 3 days straight. He didn't want to see him again. He was the emperor, but he had to listen to an emperor emeritus telling him what to do. He had already issued the edict to withdraw the war. The enlistment of the 3 armies was withdrawn. The public houses and the armies all retreated and no longer gathered at the Zheng dynasty's border. The journey was back to normal. The dark clouds of war had dispersed, and the people were relieved. Early in the morning, Lung Xiaoran came to Duanhe Hall to deal with government affairs. Once he stepped into Duanhe Hall, he was immediately refreshed by the fragrance. The dragon table was already filled with 3 large piles of memorials. He estimated that it would take an entire morning to finish reading them. This was under the condition that he was an enlightened master and was full of energy. If it was before he became an enlightened master, he would need to spend an entire day or even midnight before he could sleep. The palace maids walked lightly, afraid to disturb him. After he sat down, they served him tea and retreated. Bam! Lung Xiaoran flipped through 2 memorials and smashed them. In the palace, he tried his best to restrain the enlightened master field. The palace maids around him were ordinary people and could not withstand the enlightened master field. Their lives would be in danger if they encountered the enlightened master field. That was why the memorials were not smashed into pieces. A slightly plump old guard with white eyebrows and beard walked up and picked up the memorials. He placed them back on the table and said in a low voice, "Your Majesty, it's not worth getting angry and hurting your body. Ding Rue, don't you think it's infuriating?" Lung Xiaoran gritted his teeth. "These celestials are lawless. Do they think I can't control them?" Sigh. Ding Rue shook his head and said, "These celestial beings are really too mischievous, but your Majesty really can't do anything to them. He can't kill them personally, and the guards of the Imperial House can't do anything to them. Let the people from the Secret Guardians Hall go." Lung Xiaoran scoffed. Ding Rue said, "Ever since Commander Meng passed away, the Secret Guardians Hall is in a mess. There's really no suitable person to take over. Useless people." Lung Xiaoran snorted angrily. Ding Rue shook his head and said, "The pearl is right in front of us. No one dares to disgrace themselves." Lung Xiaoran narrowed his eyes as a cold light flashed in his eyes. "Ding Rue, you've received money from the Republic House, haven't you?" Naturally, he could tell what it meant to have a gem in front of him. Ever since Lu Yurong took over, the Secret Guardians Hall had taken on a new look, and their power had increased tremendously. However, ever since Lu Yurong was removed, the Secret Guardians Hall's morale had waned, and they were no longer as effective as before. The masters that Lu Yurong had recruited were no longer contributing. Ding Rue smiled. "Your Majesty, I don't dare to accept money. I just can't bear to see your Majesty working so hard. If Commander Lu was here, your Majesty would be very carefree." Sigh. Lung Xiaoran looked at his calm expression, and his initial vigilance relaxed. He knew Ding Rue's temperament very well. He would never accept money to speak up for others. His words had indeed struck a chord in his heart. Whenever Lu Yurong was mentioned, he would always feel a trace of annoyance and resentment. He gritted his teeth, and once again, Chu Li's detestable face appeared. "Your Majesty, why don't you ask Commander Lu to come out of seclusion again?" Ding Rue said, "I don't think Lady Lu is willing to take care of her husband and children. That's impossible." Lung Xiaoran shook his head and put away his disappointed expression. He hardened his heart again. "I can still take it. Where's Feng Er?" "The prince is hunting in the enclosure, and there are many crown princes and imperial guards following him," Ding Rue said. Lung Xiaoran nodded. He was disappointed. Feng Er was indeed not suitable to be an emperor. His heart was not firm enough, and he did not have a sense of responsibility towards the Lung family and the great Ji dynasty. He did not care about anything, and everything came too easily. He was not like himself, who was so worried about his position. Suddenly, footsteps were heard, and they landed outside the basilica in a hurry. Ding Rue bowed slightly and left. A moment later, Ding Rue came in with a solemn expression and knelt on the ground. "Your Majesty, the prince has been murdered." Lung Shoren frowned at him. "Murdered?" "An immortal broke into the enclosure, killed the prince, and then self-destructed," Ding Rue said with tears in his eyes. "Impossible." Lung Shoren waved his hand and frowned. "Nonsense. How can you make a mistake in something like this? It's impossible for Feng heir to die. As an enlightened master, he could sense his own bloodline. If Lung Feng was in danger, he would be able to sense it and immediately rush over to solve the problem. There must be a mistake." Ding Rue touched his head to the ground and slowly said, "Your Majesty, it's absolutely true. How would I dare to speak nonsense about something like this? Feng heir is really dead?" Lung Shoren frowned. Everyone saw the prince ascend to the realm beyond heaven with their own eyes. Ding Rue raised his head and slowly said, "It can't be wrong, Your Majesty. These immortals must have used some kind of secret technique or some kind of treasure to block Your Majesty's senses." Lung Shoren was still skeptical, but he trusted his own intuition more. Ding Rue saw that he was in a daze and only touched his head to the ground, not daring to disturb him. The emperor was in the most danger at this time. If he lost control and released his divine field, who knew how many people in the imperial house would suffer? Bang! Lung Shoren suddenly slammed his palm on the dragon table. The dragon table sank without a sound, as if it had turned into sand and collapsed. The memorials on the ground also turned into powder, silently merging with the powder that the dragon table had turned into. It was hard to tell them apart. He could no longer sense Lung Feng's existence, and there was indeed a treasure or secret technique blocking his senses. Ding Rue's words were true. "Your Majesty, please calm down," Ding Rue hurriedly said. "Although the prince is dead, he is still in the realm beyond heaven. It is not impossible for father and son to be reunited. Your Majesty, you must not lose your mind." Lung Shoren stared at Ding Rue and spat out 4 words, "My ass." Ding Rue quickly kowtowed and did not say a word. Lung Shoren slowly said, "Bring me there." "Yes." Ding Rue quickly stood up, bowed, and walked out, leading the way. Ding Rue did not seem to know martial arts, but he was a top-notch master at the peak of the Grandmaster's boundary. His feet fluttered as if the ground had shrunk to an inch, and he was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, he was out of the imperial house and arrived at the imperial enclosure outside the city. At this time, the imperial enclosure was heavily guarded, and the imperial guards had surrounded it tightly. More than half of the imperial house protectors had been deployed. There were more than 10 young people huddled at the edge of the forest, and a group of horses followed them. Some of them looked calm, some suppressed their fear, and some looked sad, but it was unknown whether they were faking it or they were really showing their true emotions. When they saw the emperor, they all bowed. Lung Shoren's eyes were cold. He waved his hand and asked them what happened. From their narration, Lung Shoren had a clear idea of what happened. 3 celestial beings suddenly broke into the enclosure and assassinated Lung Feng. Then the 3 celestial beings suddenly lit up and turned into 3 rays of light that shot up to the realm beyond heaven. Chapter 1837. Lung Shoren listened to their narration and waved his hand, signaling them to leave. Everyone felt as if they had been pardoned and quickly left. At first, they thought that even if they did not die, they would be severely punished. After all, it was related to the prince's assassination, and every one of them was a major suspect. They would be interrogated repeatedly until the real murderer was found. They did not expect the emperor to let them go so easily. Ding Rue wanted to say something, but stopped when he saw Lung Shoren's gloomy face and immediately shut his mouth. Lung Shoren waved his hand. Ding Rue nodded lightly and walked to a burly man and whispered a few words to him. Soon, all the imperial guards and protectors of the imperial house left, and the huge enclosure became empty. Only the sound of the wind blowing through the trees could be heard. Lung Shoren stood beside the dense forest without saying a word and only looked up at the sky. Ding Rue stood beside him and breathed softly so as not to disturb him. After a while, Ding Rue saw that he was still in a daze and called out softly, "Your Majesty? Your Majesty?" "Yes." Lung Shoren looked up at the sky and said slowly, "Ding Rue, do you think that I'm useless as an emperor?" "Your Majesty, why do you say that?" Ding Rue quickly shook his head. "Your Majesty is wise and wise. Which minister in the imperial court does not respect you?" Sigh. Lung Shoren shook his head. "I'm really useless as an emperor. It's really boring." Ding Rue advised, "Your Majesty, although the prince is dead, he did not reincarnate, nor did his soul disappear. He has only gone to the outland. Your Majesty can still see him. There's no need to be sad." "Huh?" Lung Shoren laughed and sighed. "As an emperor, I can't even protect my own son. What's the point of being an emperor? You should go back first. I want to walk alone." "Your Majesty, please don't hurt my body." Ding Rue bowed and retreated. Lung Shoren suddenly disappeared from the side of the forest. The next moment, he appeared in a forest outside of Chongming Town. He originally wanted to directly teleport to the public house, but found that there was an invisible force blocking his senses. He could not teleport directly. This was obviously Chu Li's doing. He did not know what treasure weapon was used. Ordinary formations were unable to be used against enlightened masters. Formations that could block enlightened masters were almost extinct. Beyond Heaven did not allow such formations to exist in order to establish the supreme prestige of enlightened masters. He arrived at the outskirts of Chongming Town and looked at it from afar. He could feel the prosperity of Chongming Town. He shook his head. This little-known Chongming Town actually had the shadow of the fairies' capital. With a few strides, he passed through Chongming Town and arrived outside the High Duke's public house. Then, without the protectors noticing, he glided into the public house. Just as he was about to look for Chu Li's courtyard, he suddenly turned around and saw Chu Li standing not far away, quietly watching him. He gave a fist salute. "Chu Li, I would like to have a chat with you." "Your Majesty, please." Chu Li nodded and glided away. The two of them walked on the waves and arrived at his small island. Initially, he was not in the public house. He was at Goddess Attraction Mountain, but when he sensed the fluctuation of the formation in the public house, he immediately rushed back and saw Lung Shoren. The two of them arrived at a gazebo on the island and sat down. Xueling's white clothes fluttered like snow as she approached them and curtsied. "Young master, brew some tea," Chu Li said. Xueling nodded and bowed at Lung Shoren before leaving. Lung Shoren nodded and looked at Chu Li. "I'm here to make a deal with you." Chu Li said, "Your Majesty, please speak your mind." His feelings toward Emperor Lung Shoren were rather complicated. If it was Lung Wufeng, he would have killed him long ago. Even if Lung Wufeng was not the Ji dynasty's emperor, he could not kill Lung Shoren as he was unable to do so. The key was his weakness of being soft-hearted. As an emperor, soft-hearted was indeed a fatal weakness, but to others, it was an advantage. It showed that he still had humanity. He was not just an emperor, an enlightened master, or a normal person. When Lung Shoren used Shao Qi as a threat, Chu Li immediately killed him. However, he could swear because of Lung Zhifei. Chu Li restrained his killing intent, so he could live for a while longer. He decided to kill Lung Shoren the next time he angered him. Lung Shoren said, "I want to abdicate and ascend to heaven. I want Suen to succeed me." Chu Li smiled. "Your Majesty, why are you in such a hurry to ascend? I've had enough of this position." Lung Shoren laughed self-deprecatingly. "Before I got the throne, I tried to seize it at all costs. However, now that I'm in this position, I realize that it's not as good as I imagined. It's not as free as I thought it would be. Instead, it's more painful and uncomfortable. I should have been a prince back then." Chu Li said, "Abdicate because of this? You must be joking, Your Majesty." If someone else said this, he would not believe it. However, when Lung Shoren said it, he somewhat believed it. This was because Lung Shoren was strong on the outside but weak on the inside. Although he looked solemn and cold on the outside, he was actually weak on the inside. Under extreme circumstances, he would reveal his true colors. Feng'er is dead. Lung Xiaoran laughed bitterly. As an emperor, I can't protect my own son. Isn't that ridiculous? How can I still be an emperor? Chu Li said, Your Majesty, why do you have to be so stubborn? Even the previous emperor couldn't protect King and back then. Lung Xiaoran shook his head. He's my only son. Now that he was an enlightened master, his concubines could not have martial arts. Otherwise, they would not be able to withstand his body. However, there were repercussions from the initiation. Even if they could be husband and wife, they could not have children. Chu Li nodded slowly. Because the prince has ascended, Your Majesty has to follow and take care of him? Yes. Lung Xiaoran nodded slowly. Chu Li, haven't you been trying hard to push for Su and to succeed the throne? I promise you that Su then will succeed the throne. What about the crown prince? Chu Li asked. He can't succeed the throne. Lung Xiaoran said in a low voice. I will never allow him to succeed the throne. Chu Li shook his head. Since he's the crown prince, he naturally has to succeed the throne. Otherwise, what would the world think? What would King Ping do? It seems like you have a close relationship with the crown prince. You're actually willing to give in to him in front of the throne. Lung Xiaoran said, It's hard to tell what's in a man's heart. Aren't you afraid that he'll turn against you after he becomes the emperor? Chu Li shook his head. If he was a grandmaster, he would naturally be afraid. However, as an enlightened master, he believed that King Ping would not act recklessly. More importantly, he had already pushed for King Ping to be the crown prince. If Suan suddenly became the emperor, what would King Ping think? Even if Suan became the emperor, he would still need to rely on King Ping to lead the army. No matter how smart Suan was, he would not be able to lead the army. The Ji dynasty had no divine generals except for King Ping. If Suan could not use King Ping, it would be troublesome for him to be the emperor. It would be better to not do so. As for whether King Ping would be wary of Suan after he became the emperor, it did not matter. If you want him to succeed the throne, you have to promise me something. Lung Xiaoran scoffed. Otherwise, I'd rather pass the throne to ninth brother. Tell me, Chu Li said. Kill Lung Zhifei. Lung Xiaoran said. So it's the prince that Lung Zhifei killed. Chu Li came to a sudden realization. He looked at Lung Xiaoran with pity and sighed. Is this the emperor's family? He dispelled the thought that this was a trap set up by Lung Xiaoran and Lung Zhifei. If you kill him, I'll pass the throne to King Ping. Lung Xiaoran said. All right, I agree, Chu Li said. In a flash, he disappeared on the spot. The next moment, he appeared in King Ping's imperial residence, which was also the crown prince's imperial residence. He took King Ping with him and appeared on his own island. The next moment, he disappeared again. Chapter 1838. Why is the emperor here? King Ping was surprised and closed fist saluted. He looked around, but Chu Li had already disappeared. He did not recognize this place. He glided to the pagoda and looked around. He immediately saw the vast lake and understood that this was the public house. Lung Xiaoran did not expect Chu Li to bring King Ping here immediately. He frowned and said, Fourth brother, I've discussed with Chu Li to pass the throne to you. The emperor discussed with Chu Li? King Ping was even more surprised. As far as he knew, the two were enemies. Why would they discuss the throne together? Lung Xiaoran said, I wanted to pass the throne to Suan, but Chu Li asked you to inherit the throne. King Ping frowned. Lung Xiaoran said, Then I'll give it to you. I'm going to abdicate the throne anyway. What is the emperor doing? King Ping was even more confused. He felt that the Lung Xiaoran in front of him was fake. His tone was different and his actions were strange. Lung Xiaoran scoffed and said, You'll know after this. Just tell me if you want the throne or not. No. King Ping shook his head. Lung Xiaoran sneered and shook his head. There are only the two of us here. There are no outsiders. Why lie, fourth brother? I really don't want to be the emperor. King Ping said, I'm not being polite. I can tell that being the emperor is not interesting at all. It's more comfortable to be my King Xiaoyao. If it wasn't for Chu Li's kindness, I wouldn't want to be the crown prince. Then you don't want the throne? Lung Shoren frowned. I've already promised Chu Li to pass the throne to you. I'll pass it to Suin, King Ping said. Lung Shoren looked at him from head to toe. He could not understand King Ping's thoughts. He wanted to abdicate the throne because he was tired of everything. There was also the sadness of having no successor after his son died. He only had this thought after becoming the emperor. Before becoming the emperor, he could not resist the temptation of the throne. However, King Ping had never tasted the feeling of supremacy. He must have wanted to, but he refused. It was unreasonable. King Ping said, passing the throne to Suin now is the best for the Ji dynasty and the Lung clan. I admire fourth brother now. Lung Shoren said slowly. There's nothing to admire. I've already seen through everything after the death of the princess. It doesn't matter, King Ping said calmly. Lung Shoren looked at him and nodded slowly. He was beginning to understand King Ping now. The two brothers were both soft-hearted and affectionate people. However, King Ping was affectionate towards his concubine, while King Ping was soft-hearted towards his son. They were both affected by their emotions and were indeed unsuitable to be the emperor. If that's the case, then let's pass it to Suin. He has the blood of third brother and is also the Arhut, Lung Shoren said. Just as the two of them were talking, Chu Li suddenly appeared. His entire body was surging with a terrifying aura, like a huge wave. However, his face was calm as usual. He smiled at Lung Shoren. Fortunately, I did not fail you. Lung Zhifei has ascended to heaven. Ancestor? King Ping was surprised. Chu Li smiled and said, it seems that the crown prince still does not know that Lung Feng was indeed killed by Lung Zhifei. I have already asked about it clearly before I killed him. What a wise and powerful ruler, to kill without batting an eye, even to his own descendant. As he spoke, he shook his head and sighed. He did not expect things to turn out this way. The throne that he had been pursuing was actually right in front of him. He had planned so many things in advance, but they were all useless. Zhuo Feiyang and the others had worked in vain. However, Suin had given up on it. Even if he was an enlightened master, no matter how capable he was, he could not change Suin's mind. Ancestor killed Feng heir? King Ping frowned. Why? Because Ancestor did not want Feng heir to inherit the throne. Lung Shoren laughed coldly. He was more in love with you, fourth brother. In the end, it was just as he expected. Perhaps all of this was within Ancestor's calculations. After Ancestor killed Feng heir, even if he himself was killed, he still wanted to pass the throne to fourth brother. This could very well be part of Ancestor's plan. It was really scary. Chu Li calmly replied, this wasn't part of his plan. He still wants to kill you, the emperor, so that King Ping can directly inherit the throne. After all, he's the crown prince. He admires you for coming to look for me in advance and acting before he does. He's very pleased. Sigh, why bother? King Ping shook his head and smiled bitterly. Chu Li, I will not be the emperor. Suin is more suitable. Chu Li shook his head. Don't misunderstand, Your Highness. I am not being polite. The cultivation method that Suin chose is to leave behind the dust. Inheriting the throne will delay his cultivation. Compared to becoming an emperor, he wants to become a Buddha more. King Ping frowned. Being an emperor for less than 60 years won't hinder his cultivation, right? Chu Li sighed. I will try to persuade him again. He suddenly disappeared and appeared at the Symphony Island of the High Duke's public house. Xiaoshi was dressed in a loose white robe. She was quietly cultivating on the couch. When she sensed his appearance, she opened her eyes. Clear light shone, and the room seemed to suddenly brighten up. Chu Li said, go and see Suin and persuade him. Persuade him to become the emperor? Xiaoshi frowned. Chu Li nodded. Now, there's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for him. The throne is within his grasp. That's good too. I haven't seen him for a while. Xiaoshi nodded. Chu Li grabbed her wrist and suddenly disappeared. The next moment, he appeared outside the Titanium Temple. The Titanium Temple was still bathed in golden light. To others, it was just a shabby small temple. It was quiet and peaceful. Time seemed to have stopped in this small temple. The vicissitudes of time could be seen on the courtyard walls, but there was no feeling of time passing. There was only tranquility. As soon as he and Xiao appeared, the courtyard door opened. Suen, dressed in a gray robe, slowly walked out. He came before the two and bowed with pressed palms. Chief Chu and Xiao. Xiao looked at him and pursed her lips into a smile. You've grown taller. I need to make 2 new sets of robes. When Chu saw him come out, he knew that a monk in the temple had predicted his arrival. This was not inferior to his heavenly star insight skill. It was probably a divine power similar to the heaven's eye. Divine powers were indeed unique. Suen lowered his head to look at himself and nodded embarrassedly. I heard that you don't want to be the emperor anymore. Xiao scoffed. Suen shook his head. I am cultivating the separation technique. I am in a good state. It is not suitable for me to be an emperor and be lost in the secular world. Whether you are lost or not doesn't depend on whether you are an emperor or not. It depends on your state of mind. Xiao said impatiently. Being an emperor can train your state of mind. It will strengthen your state of mind. If being an emperor hinders your cultivation, then your cultivation will not be stable and it will be hard for you to reach perfection. Suen said, Master's granduncle once told me that if I become an emperor, I will definitely die. It will delay my life. Xiao frowned. Which master's granduncle? Master's granduncle Tianji. Suen shook his head and said, Marshal Granduncle Tianji's Heaven's Eye connection has already reached great success. There is no escape for him in the world. Before he became a Buddha, he told me this. That's why I cultivated the method of transcendence, not wanting to delay this life. The 10 lifetimes of Buddhahood required 1 lifetime of cultivation after another. He was still young. If he died so soon, he would delay his life. In the future, the rank of Buddha would drop by 1 level. Compared to this, the throne was insignificant. After all, he was just a passerby of the throne. If that's the case, Xiao nodded. That's fine. Cultivate well. Don't worry about anything else. Suen nodded. Aunt Xiao, the imperial residence has its own fate. There's no need to force yourself. All right, I know. Go back and cultivate. Xiao patted his shoulder. Suen bowed with pressed palms at Chu Li. He turned around and slowly walked into the courtyard. Chapter 1839. Chu Li smiled, feeling that Suen has grown up. Yes, the little monk has grown up too. Xiao nodded. Chu Li said he couldn't bear it. That's why he left in such a hurry. Let's go. Xiao rolled her eyes and scoffed. I know what he's thinking. Chu Li shook his head and laughed. He grabbed her wrist and returned to Symphony Island. Lung Shoren and Lung Shouqian were both there. Chu Li Fist saluted and sat down in the gazebo. Your Majesty, Your Highness, Suen won't take over the throne. He wants to become a Buddha, and the throne is insignificant to him. He prefers the life in the Titanium Temple. Forget it. Let him be. Such a strong Buddha nature. Lung Shoren sighed. Fine, if that's the case, we won't force him. Let's pass the throne to 4th brother. But since 4th brother is in a hurry, it's best for you to accept the enlightenment technique before ascending the throne. Of course. Chu Li nodded. King Ping's martial arts was not high, so his achievement as an enlightened master would be limited. Enlightenment? King Ping said, I don't think that's necessary. If you don't want to be bullied after you become the emperor, you still have to do it. Lung Shoren said, but there's a risk with enlightenment. It's possible that you won't be able to have an heir. 4th brother, you don't have a child yet, King Ping pondered. Chu Li said, then let's wait. It won't be too late to wait until Consort Ping is pregnant. Lung Shoren nodded. That's for the best. I've suffered this before. I hope 4th brother will reconsider. From the bottom of his heart, he did not want to hand over the throne to King Ping. However, since he had already made the vow, he would naturally abide by it. Moreover, he was disheartened and did not hate King Ping that much. However, it was also a pleasure to be able to drag things out for a while and whet King Ping's appetite. King Ping sighed. Then let's wait. Chu Li said, 2 months. Your Highness, we can't delay it for too long. All right. King Ping nodded slowly. Chu Li then sent the 2 off. When he returned to his island, he was filled with guilt. He had worked hard for nothing. In the end, the throne did not fall to Suen. It was a blessing that it fell to King Ping. At least he did not have to worry about the rear and could focus on his work. Young master, Li Meng is here. Shui Ling came and whispered. Chu Li raised his eyebrows. Shui Ling said softly. She disguised herself and came here quietly. Bring him to me. Chu Li frowned. He carefully sensed that nothing had happened to Sun Mingwei. Why did Li Meng come here so sneakily? Shui came in with a handsome young man. This handsome young man strode forward with a straight back and a dignified appearance. There was no trace of makeup on him, and no one could tell that he was Li Meng in disguise. Chu Li nodded in satisfaction. Martial Uncle Chu, can my disguise fool others? Li Meng proudly turned around and replied with a smile. Her voice was sweet and melodious. Chu Li smiled. That's right. Sit down and talk. I'll just stand, Li Meng said. Does your master have something important to tell me? Chu Li did not force the issue and went straight to the point. Master sent me here to pass on a message to tell Masters Junior Chu not to go to the Great Light Peak for the time being. Huh. It's because a great grandmaster has come to Great Light Peak. Li Meng curled her lips and scoffed. This great grandmaster has ordered Master to cut off all ties with you, Masters Junior Chu. A celestial being? Chu Li asked. Li Meng slowly nodded. Chu Li frowned and stood up to pace with his hands behind his back. Li Mengwu's big round eyes stared at his figure, following his movements and turning her eyes. He's not here with good intentions. This great grandmaster wants your master to kill me, right? Chu Li asked. Li Meng hesitated for a moment and nodded. Chu Li said, your master strongly disagreed, but your great grandmaster was too aggressive and took out the sex order, so your master had no choice but to take a step back and stop contacting me. Am I right? Li Meng nodded vigorously. She could not help but secretly praise Masters Junior Chu for being so smart. Chu Li did not read her thoughts and only speculated. Looks like the Li dynasty really wants to join forces with the Zheng dynasty to fight against the Ji dynasty. Yes. Li Meng hesitated for a moment and slowly nodded. She was siding with her family and not with reason. Even though she was from Li dynasty, she still acknowledged the news. Chu Li sighed. It's been hard on your master. On one side was the sex order, and on the other side was him. Sun Mingwei must be under a lot of pressure to be caught in the middle. Fortunately, she had a steady personality and could withstand the pressure. She even secretly sent Li Meng to inform him. Li Meng sighed. It's really hard on Master. Chu Li nodded. Anything else? Also, Master told you to be careful of one person, Li Meng said. Li Meng said, he is Dong Guangyi, the Zheng dynasty's newly appointed heavenly god, a genius disciple of Black Tortoise Mountain. Master said that this Dong Guangyi is a proud son of heaven, and his luck is exceptionally good. You must be careful. Not inferior to me? Chu Li asked. Li Meng nodded. Chu Li pondered. Dong Guangyi, he had never heard of this person before. When he was the commander of the Secret Guardians Hall, he had a deep understanding of the Zheng dynasty. There was no master named Dong Guangyi in the Black Tortoise Mountain. This meant that Dong Guangyi suddenly rose to power. He must have had a fortuitous encounter or cultivated hard for decades to amaze everyone. I heard Master say that there's a big shot among the Celestials behind Dong Guangyi, Li Meng said. His martial arts is excellent and his cultivation level is high. I'm afraid he'll become a strong opponent for you, Masters Junior Chu. You must not be careless. Chu Li smiled and nodded. All right. Li Meng clapped her hands and quickly said, I almost forgot to mention that Dong Guangyi is also very young. He's about the same age as you, Masters Junior Chu. Chu Li smiled. That's interesting. Li Meng said, Anyway, Master seriously told me to be careful of this person. I don't want to fail miserably and ruin my reputation. Chu Li smiled and nodded. The title of the world's #1 master had always been a joke. Who would dare to call themselves the world's #1? He had never thought of himself as such. Li Meng hesitated for a while and said softly, Master also said that you shouldn't get involved in the matters between the Ji dynasty and the Zheng dynasty. Hmm? Chu Li was stunned. Li Meng nodded. That's what Master said, and he didn't look too good. Not good, Chu Li pondered. Son Mingwei should know his temperament. He would never stand by and watch innocent people suffer in a war. He would definitely stop the war from happening. However, she warned him not to get involved. There must be an inside story, but she could not say it out loud. Chu Li had to speculate. Sun Mingwei must have told him not to get involved for his own good. If that was the case, it would be dangerous for him to get involved. It meant that the Zheng dynasty and the Li dynasty were very powerful, and he was no match for them. It seemed that Dong Guangyi was indeed a strong opponent. He even had a powerful celestial being. Anything else? Chu Li asked gently. Li Meng shook her head. No, that's all. All right, I understand. Chu Li smiled. Tell your master not to worry. I know what I'm doing. Master advises you not to mess around. We can't stop a war between countries, Li Meng quickly said. Chu Li smiled. Li Meng knew that he did not listen to her when she saw his smile. She became anxious. Master can't be wrong. Master's Junior Chu, please listen to me. Chu Li said, I'll try my best. Chapter 1840. As he was talking to Li Meng, Shui's white robe fluttered over, bringing with it a faint fragrance. She whispered, Master, I've received news that the Zheng dynasty has declared war on the Ji dynasty. I heard that the border has begun to gather troops. Chu Li stood up immediately. Shui said, the Ji dynasty has just retracted their declaration of war, and the Zheng dynasty has declared war. Master, this time, she shook her head gently. Chu Li took a deep breath and sneered. These celestial beings can't wait. He guessed that the celestial beings had received the news of Lung Zhifei's death and knew that they could not fight, so they took the initiative to declare war. Shui whispered, Master, the Zheng dynasty might have their own reasons. The Zheng dynasty has been developing all these years, and the Fu dynasty wanted to stop them, but they encountered you and suffered many setbacks. They had no time to stop the Zheng dynasty and allowed the Zheng dynasty to develop. When the Fu dynasty's emperor is weak, they will definitely not let go of this opportunity to rise. Chu Li glanced at Shui. He did not expect her to grow to this stage. She was indeed very talented. Li Meng quickly said, Master's Junior Chu, don't forget what Master said. Chu Li looked at Li Meng and smiled. Do you want me to sit here and wait for the Zheng dynasty's army to attack? He had just pacified the Ji dynasty. His original plan was to go to the Zheng dynasty's imperial family to pacify this side and the other side. It was impossible to stop fighting if one side was suppressed. He did not expect the Zheng dynasty to declare war one step ahead. Li Meng said, Master's Junior Chu, you can't stop the Zheng dynasty. How will you know if you don't try? Chu Li said. He turned around and asked, Shui, do you have a longevity grass? Yes, I found 3. Shui nodded and said, I've planted them in the courtyard. Chu Li smiled in satisfaction. 3 is enough. Give it to me. Yes, Shui replied and fluttered away. Master's Junior Chu, are you going to the Zheng dynasty? Li Meng asked helplessly. Chu Li smiled as a tacit agreement. Sigh. Li Meng felt that she was so useless. She could not even persuade Chu Li. If only her master was here, it would be great. Unfortunately, her master did not dare to come over. The great master was too fierce and watched over him too closely. Otherwise, he would not have sent her to sneak over. Chu Li smiled. Why are you sighing at such a young age? Go back quickly and don't let masters find you. I will be careful. All right. Li Meng could only stand up, curtsied, and left. She had to tell her master this news as soon as possible. By the time Chu Li stood in the Zheng dynasty's capital, St. P City, it was already 2 days later. It was the first time he came to St. P City, so he couldn't teleport here directly. He had to use his Qin Gong according to the map. Shang'an City was like a giant beast entrenched under a towering, snow-capped peak. One could only see the snow halfway up the snow-capped peak, but not the upper half hidden in the clouds. Compared to the towering snow-capped mountain, the huge San'an City didn't seem that huge. Chu Li stood in front of Saint P City and felt a chill. It was not the cold wind that blew from the snowy mountains, but a chill that came from his bones. It was an inexplicable sense of danger. His instinct told him to leave this place and not enter. Chu Li's omniscient mirror spread out and enveloped Saint's Peace City, allowing him to see the entire city. Saint's Peace City was built in an ancient style, similar to that of the Great Li Dynasty. However, compared to the Great Li Dynasty, it was less exquisite and more fierce. One could tell at a glance that the people in the city were tough and good at fighting. They were all natural warriors. Chu Li frowned slightly. This was the same as the information from the Secret Guardian's Hall. However, after seeing it with his own eyes, he realized that the information was not exaggerated enough. Instead, it was understated. The Zheng dynasty's imperial court was definitely very aggressive with such a courageous people. To be able to hide their strength for so long, it was obvious that they had a big plan. It seemed like the Zheng dynasty's war this time was not purely instigated by the Celestials. It was also the Zheng dynasty's own will. It seemed like they had to kill the emperor. With a murderous intent, he used the omniscient mirror to envelop the Zheng dynasty's imperial palace. However, as soon as the omniscient mirror shone, the Zheng dynasty's imperial palace suddenly flashed with a green light. Then, the imperial palace disappeared from the omniscient mirror, as if it did not exist. He could not sense it no matter what. It was extremely strange. Chu Li frowned. The imperial palace was obviously protected by a treasure that could isolate it from prying eyes. It was better than the Ji dynasty. He could not find out the truth, but he felt a sense of dread toward the imperial palace. After some thought, he looked up to the sky and roared. His roar was like thunder. Where is the Zheng dynasty's emperor? Chu Li is here. Since he knew that there was danger, he would not force his way in. He was not arrogant enough to think that he was invincible. His instincts would not lie. Chu Li is here. Where is the Zheng dynasty's emperor, Zheng Donglai? Chu Li shouted in a deep voice. His shout was like a thunderclap that shook the entire Saint's Peace City. The snowy peaks in the distance seemed to start sliding down ice and snow. He had gathered the enlightened master's power in his shout. Its power was astonishing. If one were to get close, even a grandmaster would be shocked to death. Chu Li, how dare you? Amidst the roar, a yellow figure appeared in the sky. His bright yellow robe shone with golden light under the sun. The Zheng dynasty's emperor, Zheng Donglai, was a tall and burly middle-aged man. He had a protruding nose and a square mouth. His forehead was full and wide, and his eyes were merciless and cold. He looked at Chu Li eerily, making people shudder. Chu Li looked up and smiled at Zheng Donglai. Your Majesty must have many masters lying in ambush in the imperial palace, right? That's right. I admire you for daring to come here. Unfortunately, this is a dead end. Zheng Donglai stood in the void with his hands behind his back. He shook his head proudly. Since you're here, don't even think about going back. As soon as he finished speaking, silhouettes suddenly appeared in the void around him. 12 silhouettes surrounded Chu Li. Chu Li's expression changed slightly. His omniscient mirror saw Sun Mingyue behind him. Sun Mingyue was covered with a white veil. Her clothes were as white as snow, revealing only a pair of bright eyes. Beside her was a woman dressed similarly. Her clothes were also as white as snow. A white veil covered her face, revealing only a pair of clear eyes. However, Chu Li could recognize her at a glance. Sun Mingyue's phoenix-like eyes revealed a complicated expression, but she remained silent. Chu Li quickly regained his composure. He glanced at the 12 people around him, and his gaze stopped on the face of a young man. This young man was burly, but not tall. His appearance was not too handsome either. He was only slightly better than the average person. He looked like a straightforward young man. He was not scheming and was outspoken. With a glance, he could clearly see who was a celestial and who was an enlightened master. As for grandmasters, they were not qualified to stand in front of him at all. 8 rank, 2 celestials, and 4 enlightened masters. I'm really shocked. Chu Li withdrew his gaze and looked at Zheng Donglai. He said calmly, You want to kill me just like that? Among the 4 enlightened masters, one was Sun Mingyue, another was the emperor of the Li dynasty, and another was Zheng Donglai. The last one was that young man. He must be the Zheng dynasty's new enlightened master, Dong Guangyi, whom Li Meng had mentioned. His cultivation level was indeed profound. At first glance, he seemed to be on par with Zheng Donglai. This was somewhat shocking. Zheng Donglai had obtained all kinds of fortuitous encounters and his own talent. How could Dong Guangyi have reached this level? He did not look like a very smart person. Could it be that his luck was better than his? What was even stranger was where did so many rank 2 celestials come from? As far as he knew, rank 2 celestials were all important people. It was not easy to gather 8 of them. This showed how capable Zheng Donglai was. If you can escape, then you'll be the world's #1 master, Zheng Donglai said in a low voice. Chapter 1841. Chu Li chuckled. The world's #1 master is just a joke. Who's truly invincible? Your Majesty, it's better if you don't bring it up again. He turned a glance at Sun Mingwei and smiled. I didn't expect Bishop's son to be here too. Sun Mingwei said coldly. Chu Li, you shouldn't have gotten involved. The country's affairs are more important. Don't blame me. I'll make it up to you when I get to the Grandmaster. Her voice rang in Chu Li's mind. Hurry up and leave. Their Diamond Supreme scripture could communicate telepathically. Chu Li said, there's no hurry. They're going to use the God Restraining Seal. You can't stop them. Sun Mingwei said anxiously. Chu Li scoffed. I like to see it for myself. You. Sun Mingwei could not help but panic. Chu Li said, you're really righteous. You're indeed a leader. I won't blame you. If I kill you, don't blame me. Of course. Sun Mingwei's clear eyes flashed coldly. She scoffed. Let's see who's capable. She knew Chu Li's temperament. There was no point in trying to persuade him. Everyone smiled as they watched. Chu Li and Sun Mingwei's friendship was well known. Outsiders might not know, but it was widely known among the enlightened masters. When the two were in the Grandmaster's boundary, they could work together to deal with enlightened masters. Now that they were enlightened masters, they would be even more terrifying if they worked together. Just thinking about it gave him a headache. Now that they were separated, each serving their own masters, he could not help but lament. The world was unpredictable. Even as enlightened masters, they had no choice. Let's do it. The woman in white beside Sun Mingwei scoffed. Her white robe could not hide her graceful figure. Her eyes were bright, and it was obvious that she was still young and beautiful. Her voice was crisp and sweet. Chu Li knew that she was Sun Mingwei's master, Jing Miaoyan. She was not young. The 8 celestial beings' bodies lit up at the same time. They opened their mouths and silently chanted. Chu Li knew what they were doing. They were worshipping heaven. Bam! The 8 of them chanted quickly. They finished in the blink of an eye. Then their bodies lit up again and dimmed. 8 rays of light gathered in the sky and shot up. Then, a ray of light descended from the sky and hit Chu Li in an instant. Chu Li had already sensed danger when they were chanting. He wanted to move, but realized that the void around him had been locked, so he could not move away. When a light shone, he had already moved 10 meters away with his light body technique. The omniscient mirror enveloped his surroundings. He had sensed it in advance as soon as the light fell, and with this sense, he had moved in advance. Unfortunately, this streak of light also turned. Although he moved 10 meters away, it instantly caught up with him. Its speed was too fast. This time, Chu Li could not dodge it in time and took the hit head-on. Bang! A muffled sound rang out, but his figure did not retreat. His expression changed slightly as a strange force seeped into his body and immediately cut off his connection with the sky beyond heaven. It was no different from sealing his cultivation. This move was similar to the divine punishment that the sky beyond heaven had sent down. However, he was not flustered at all. He circulated the True Supreme Vajra Sutra, and it wouldn't take long for him to break through. His cultivation has already been crippled. Hurry up and do it. A middle-aged man hissed. The bodies of the 8 Devis were dim, like candles that had been burned out and could be extinguished at any time. It was obvious that this God-forbidding seal had come at a great cost, and they would not be able to recover in a short time. Chu Li's enlightened master field also dissipated in an instant, as if he had been forcefully thinned out. All of them knew that the God-forbidding seal had taken effect. Chu Li no longer had the power of an enlightened master, and his connection with the sky beyond heaven had been cut off. Although these Devis and enlightened masters knew that Chu Li had been hunted by the sky beyond order, they did not know that Chu Li had been punished by the divine punishment and sealed as an enlightened master. In the end, he broke the seal and became a true enlightened master. When they saw that the God-forbidding seal had taken effect, they were confident that they would be able to kill Chu Li today. Without the power of an enlightened master, Chu Li would not be able to escape the encirclement of the 4 enlightened masters, no matter how strong he was. They secretly thought that if the 4 enlightened masters could not kill a grandmaster whose enlightened master's cultivation had been sealed, then they might as well commit suicide. Zheng Donglai shouted, "Young Master Dong, let's do it." Dong Guangyi nodded and drew the long blade from his waist. He let out a long sigh and said, "Chu Li, don't blame me. Although we didn't become enemies, it's a pity that you're from the Ji dynasty. It's a pity that we can't drink together. Let's meet again in the sky beyond heaven." As soon as he finished speaking, he slashed down with his blade. The blade flashed in front of everyone's eyes and immediately arrived in front of Chu Li's neck, about to chop off his head. Bang! Chu Li straightened his palm like a blade and slashed at the blade. His palm collided with the treasure blade, but it was not damaged at all, leaving only a white mark. He looked at Dong Guangyi calmly. "Dong Guangyi from the Black Tortoise Mountain? That's me." Dong Guangyi was secretly shocked. He did not expect Chu Li's physical strength to be so strong. After all, he was using the treasure blade of the Black Tortoise Mountain, which could cut through iron like mud, but he could not cut off Chu Li's hand. Chu Li said calmly, "I've heard of you." Zheng Donglai slammed his palm down. The palm force was invisible but sharp like a blade. Chu Li did not panic as he channeled the true supreme titanium scripture to attack that ball of energy. At the same time, he channeled the supreme, indestructible body of Vajra. At the same time, he pressed his left hand on the sky-killing sword and channeled the heaven-killing technique. He was doing 3 things at once, but it was easy. The heaven-killing technique did not use inner energy, but lifespan. Therefore, it did not conflict with the true supreme titanium scripture and could be channeled together. Bang! Zheng Donglai's right palm collided with Chu Li's right palm. His body flipped and flew backward, unable to step into the void. He landed on the ground and staggered 2 steps back. His face was red and his eyes were wide open. He scoffed and said, "What a profound cultivation level." Again, they were very confident in the God-restraining seal. Chu Li's enlightened God field had already dispersed, so his current cultivation level was only what was originally stored in his body. Every bit he used would decrease. No matter how strong he was, there was still a limit to how much he could use. He leaped up and dove like an eagle catching a rabbit. Bang! Chu Li met his palm again and sent him flying again. Chu Li did not use his full strength. Most of his attention was focused on attacking the God-restraining seal. The true supreme titanium scripture attacked again and again. The God-restraining seal was like a dam under a flood. It could be destroyed at any time and was on the verge of collapse. "Watch out for my blade," Dong Guangyi shouted, and the blade flashed. Chu Li squinted his eyes. This blade was similar to a sneak attack. It happened when Chu Li and Zheng Donglai's palms collided. The old force had just dissipated, but the new force had not yet recovered. Chu Li's timing was precise. It could be seen that Dong Guangyi was honest on the outside, but a traitor on the inside. He was very good at disguising himself. Chu Li straightened his palm again and slashed horizontally like a blade. TSS. Dong Guangyi's treasure blade suddenly shone brightly. Chu Li felt a sense of danger. He changed his palm into a finger and dodged the blade by a hair's breadth. When his finger and the blade crossed, he flicked it lightly. Ding! The treasure blade let out a clear sound. Suddenly, it flickered and flickered. Dong Guangyi's body froze. The power of Philip's swift thunder was beyond his expectations. His entire body suddenly became numb. Chu Li changed his finger into a fist. Bang! Zheng Donglai blocked Dong Guangyi's punch with his palm. His body was pushed back as if there was a rope pulling on his back. Two parallel deep marks were left under his feet. It was obvious that the fist force was fierce and overbearing. Brother's son, cult leader's son, if you don't attack now, when will you? Zheng Donglai shouted. He initially thought that he and Dong Guangyi would be able to defeat Chu Li under the God-restraining seal. He did not expect Chu Li to be so powerful, even though his enlightened master's power was sealed. Dong Guangyi's cultivation level seemed to be similar to his, but he was no match for him in a fight. The enlightened master's power could not penetrate his body. It seemed that he would not be able to take him down for a while. Chapter 1842. Dong Guangyi's body regained its mobility, but he still had a lingering fear. If he had not teamed up with Zheng Donglai, he would have been killed by Chu Li. It was a close call. He did not expect Chu Li to be so difficult to deal with. If he was at his peak, he would not have been a match for Chu Li. He had too many tricks up his sleeves. He immediately put away his inner arrogance and devoted himself to fighting the enemy. He was proud when he saw that his cultivation level was similar to Chu Li's. Moreover, Chu Li was hit by the God-forbidding seal, so it was a piece of cake to take him down. Without the help of the spiritual energy from the outland, just the spiritual energy from the surroundings would be like replacing a treasure knife with a wooden knife. The power would be incomparable. As long as the enlightened master's energy stored in Chu Li's body was completely depleted, he would be defenseless and would definitely die. With this thought, he was careless and almost got killed by Chu Li. He nodded and thanked Zheng Donglai. The treasure knife became unusually bright and cold. He was no longer greedy and wanted to be stable. This was the true essence of his black tortoise power. Once it slowed down, its power would increase tremendously. As he slowly swung his blade downwards, the energy of the blade swept across the land. The blade was full and smooth, and it was invulnerable. Chu Li glanced at it and took a step back to avoid the sharp edge. Sun Mingwei did not move, but Sun Faxing took a step forward and punched. Bam! Chu Li took the punch head-on. Sun Faxing's fist force was strange. One palm energy contained several forces, entangled and inconsistent. It was like several snakes entangled together, tearing at the defense at the same time. Its power was shocking and was harder to deal with than the knife-like palm energy. The supreme, indestructible body of Vajra was as solid as a rock. No matter how strange the force was, it was always repelled. It blocked the punch and pushed Sun Faxing back. Sun Faxing frowned. He did not expect Chu Li to be so difficult to deal with. He continued to punch. Zheng Donglai punched, and Dong Guangyi's knife overflowed. The three of them attacked together to exhaust Chu Li's inner energy. They believed that once Chu Li's inner energy was exhausted, he would no longer have the enlightened master's energy and could not absorb spiritual energy from outland. Sun Mingwei stood at the side and did not move. Jing Miaoyun, who was dim and weak, asked, Mingwei, why are you not moving? Honorable Master, Sun Mingwei shook her head. Forget it, I'm not needed. A long night is fraught with dreams. Jing Miaoyun's crisp voice was filled with coldness. What time is it now? Still talking about women's benevolence? Since you've already started, don't look back. Follow this path to the end. Yes. Sun Mingwei sighed faintly and was about to strike. Just as she was about to make a move, her expression suddenly changed. She pulled Jing Miaoyun and retreated a few dozen feet away. Chu Li pulled out the heaven-killing sword and slowly slashed the necks of the remaining 7 Devis. 7 heads flew up. Jing Miaoyun barely dodged. The other 3 enlightened masters did not manage to save him in time and could only watch helplessly as Chu Li easily killed the celestial being. The price of using the God Restraining Seal was extremely high. His cultivation level would be completely depleted. Initially, he wanted to stay and see how Chu Li would die. After all, Chu Li had also jumped. Not long after, watching him die was the best thing to do. Unfortunately, they had only calculated that Chu Li was like a toothless tiger. They did not expect Chu Li to be able to use the Sky Regicide Sword. Even if they were in peak condition, it was still very difficult to dodge, let alone in their weakened state. None of the 7 of them could escape the fate of being beheaded. They all turned into streams of light and charged toward the slowly opening divine gate. Chu Li, Zheng Donglai was furious. Chu Li sheathed his sword and smiled at Jing Miaoyun before turning to look at Zheng Donglai. Zheng Donglai's body had already swelled up like an inflated balloon. Dong Guangyi did the same. A black tortoise slowly appeared in the sky and slowly landed on his body as if it was possessing him. Sun Faxing's body did not move, but his aura continued to rise. It was as if he had gone from a small mountain to a towering peak. It was obvious that he had not used his full strength before. "Kill him," Zheng Donglai shouted. Chu Li frowned. Jing Miaoyun turned into a stream of light and shot toward him. It was too late to dodge. Bang! Jing Miaoyun suddenly turned into a ball of light and exploded. Then a beam of light shot into the sky. Chu Li only felt as if he had fallen into a raging flame. The energy of extreme yang eroded him. It was tyrannical and overbearing. The God-restraining seal that was already loosening and about to collapse suddenly solidified. It was 2 times stronger than before. As a result, he was unable to break free for a while. A cold light flashed in Chu Li's eyes. He did not expect that his kindness of sparing her would lead to such an end. Jing Miaoyun was so unyielding that she immediately self-destructed and turned into the Great Light Flame. She used the secret technique of Great Light. It was truly ruthless. He can't hold on anymore. Zheng Donglai saw that Chu Li's originally rising aura was declining again. He was overjoyed. "Leader's son, don't let Senior Jing's sacrifice be in vain." Sun Mingwei sighed secretly. She did not expect Master to want to kill Chu Li so much. Bang, 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 bang. Dong Guangyi rushed over. He did not use his blade and used his fists as weapons to hit Chu Li. Chu Li faced him head-on. He channeled the true, supreme titanium supreme scripture and the supreme indestructible titanium body at the same time. Their fists collided and met force with force. For a while, it was hard to tell who was superior. Dong Guangyi's skin became extremely thick, and his strength increased. It was as if he was a different person from before. Zheng Donglai's palm force was like a treasure blade. It was several times sharper and could already faintly pierce into his palm, breaking through the supreme, indestructible titanium body's defense. The power of Sun Faxing's fists had also increased by several times. Sun Mingwei hesitated for a moment before throwing a light punch. Bang! Chu Li took her punch head-on and took 2 steps back. The power of the divine light fist was amazing. Zheng Donglai was overjoyed and laughed. "Chu Li, you will die today." Chu Li drew his sword out of its scabbard. Suddenly, the surrounding space was locked. He stabbed his sword at Zheng Donglai. As long as he killed Zheng Donglai, the Zheng dynasty could retreat. Bang! The tip of the sword was blocked by a palm-sized shield. Chu Li felt a strong recoil from the tip of the sword. The inner energy of the true supreme, titanium supreme scripture was almost exhausted. The supreme indestructible titanium body's power began to decline and could not hold on for long. Chu Li's expression did not change, but he secretly frowned. This was troublesome. If the inner energy of the true, supreme, titanium supreme scripture was insufficient, he would not be able to break through the God-forbidding seal. The Sky Killer Sword alone might not be able to kill these people. What was worse was that the Sky Killer Sword could be blocked. Dong Guangyi held the palm-sized shield in his hand. After blocking the attack, he staggered a few steps back. His face was red, and he almost vomited blood, but there was a smile on his face. The black tortoise shield could actually block the Sky Killer Sword. Although the power of the Sky Killer Sword was amazing and almost injured him, it could be blocked. This was the most important thing. Chu Li's expression changed slightly. This sword consumed 300 years of his life. The sword that killed the 7 celestial beings consumed 500 years, so 800 years of his life was consumed. He did not believe it and attacked again. 500 years of his life was stabbed again. If this sword did not succeed, he would no longer be able to use the Sky Killer sword. His life was limited. Ding! The black tortoise shield blocked the sword again. Bang! Dong Guangyi crashed into a tree. Suddenly, the tree trembled. In the blink of an eye, the leaves withered and died. Dong Guangyi's mouth was bloody, but he was smiling. The other three enlightened masters attacked Chu Li. Bang! After Chu Li took a palm from Sun Faxing, the supreme, indestructible titanium body was finally broken. The inner energy of the true supreme, titanium supreme scripture was already depleted and could not continue. He vomited blood and staggered backward, leaning against a tree. Chapter 1843. Bam, 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 bam. Punches and palms kept coming at Chu Li. They had all activated their secret arts and unleashed their mystical techniques. If he had the supreme Vajra invincible body, he could still block them. However, he couldn't use the supreme Vajra invincible body. He could clearly feel how astonishing the power of every punch and palm was. His hand pressed on the heaven-killing sword and activated the heaven-killing incantation. Relying on the heaven-killing incantation to protect his body, he continued to attack them without fear of death. His lifespan continued to decrease, and if this continued, his life would be over. Chu Li anxiously tried to think of a solution. He had already discovered that the void around him was no longer sealed. It was obviously the work of the 8 great celestial beings. Zheng Donglai and the others had been negligent. He could have escaped at any time, but he was really unwilling to escape like this. If he couldn't kill Zheng Donglai, he couldn't force the Zheng Empire to retreat. Bang! Dong Guangyi suddenly shrunk his body and turned into a shadow that crashed into Chu Li. Chu Li countered with a palm strike. Bang! Dong Guangyi's shadow passed through Chu Li's palm and appeared behind him. Then he slapped Chu Li's back. Chu Li staggered forward and felt a sharp pain in his back. Dong Guangyi disappeared in a flash and avoided Chu Li's retaliatory palm energy. Chu Li's omniscient mirror had already seen a short dagger stuck in his back. It was as black as ink and emitted a chilling aura, just like the taste of death. The chilling aura was constantly corroding his body, surging to every part of his body. Wherever the cold air passed, life would disappear and flesh would wither. I obtained this underworld dagger by accident. I've never had the chance to use it. Dong Guangyi stood 100 feet away and shouted, Chu Li, have a taste. Chu Li reached out his hand to pull it out, but he felt a sharp pain and could not pull it out. The dagger had actually grown countless thin and long tendrils. They were thin and tough, firmly drilling into his flesh like tree roots in the soil. Bang, 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 bang. Zheng Donglai, Sun Faxing, and Sun Mingyue attacked nonstop. Their fists and palms were endless. He pressed his hand on the heaven-slaughtering sword to block. He started to withdraw the true, supreme, Vajra supreme scripture, actually giving up on attacking the God-forbidding seal. But right now, he couldn't care less. The underworld dagger was his biggest problem. He began to activate the Earth Matrix and Reincarnation Scripture. I'll lend you a hand. Sun Mingyue's voice rang out in his mind. She regretted not lending Chu Li a hand earlier. With her own supreme diamond scripture, Chu Li might have already broken through the God-forbidding seal if the two of them worked together. He would not have fallen to such a state. Don't move. Chu Li's voice rang in her head. Sun Mingyue snorted in his mind. Look at the situation now. Why are you still trying to show off? Chu Li replied, I have my own plans. The two of them exchanged blows without the slightest bit of mercy. Bystanders could not see any flaws, much less tell that they were communicating. The Earth Matrix and Reincarnation Scripture began to circulate. Immediately, the underworld dagger's cold current sped up and went against the strange power in his body, the power of the God-forbidding seal. The two forces collided and immediately attacked each other. Underworld dagger's power kept pouring in, rushing towards the God-forbidding seal. The power of the God-restraining seal was strange, but it countered the power of the underworld dagger. Both of them attacked each other as if they had met their mortal enemy. Chu Li let out a sigh of relief. Bam, 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 bam. He was still being attacked by the 4 enlightened masters, but he did not budge. He was as hard as a rock. Dong Guangyi frowned. He did not expect Chu Li to not die after being hit by the underworld dagger. His vitality was really strong. It was no wonder he could run amok until now. All the more reason to kill him. If he did not die, Dong Guangyi would not be able to eat or sleep in peace. A small red bead slipped out of his sleeve. It was the size of a red bean and was very inconspicuous. He threw the bead silently at Chu Li's back. It was a sneak attack while Chu Li and the other 3 were fighting. Chu Li suddenly moved and barely avoided the bead. Bam! The bead exploded and turned into water droplets that scattered. Chu Li could not avoid it completely. 2 droplets splashed on the back of his hand. Suddenly, intense pain came from the back of his hand. 2 small holes appeared on the back of his hand. The bloody holes were gone, and white bones with red smoke could be seen. It was as if the white bones were turning pink. What is this? Chu Li gritted his teeth and ignored the pain. Dong Guangyi smiled. This is the sun's real liquid. How powerful is it? Where did it come from? Chu Li asked in a low voice. He realized that the red energy was still drilling into his body as if it wanted to melt his bones. Thus, he activated the Earth Matrix and Reincarnation Scripture to transform it. Unfortunately, this sun's real liquid was strange and could not be transformed. Dong Guangyi said, I got it by chance. Chu Li knew it was another fortuitous encounter. This guy had more fortuitous encounters than himself. Dong Guangyi was even more afraid. At this time, they could not take Chu Li down even after activating their secret skill for so long. Was there really no way to deal with him? Any weapon that they thought was fatal could not kill him. Chu Li sighed. You guys are too impatient. As Zheng Donglai approached, he suddenly reached behind him and pulled out the underworld dagger, stabbing it into Zheng Donglai's palm. Zheng Donglai grunted, and his expression changed. He sensed that something was wrong. The cold air entered his palm and quickly traveled up his arm to his heart. He tried to pull it out, but he found that he could not pull it out. The underworld dagger had already reached out, its long tendrils digging into his flesh. Your Majesty quickly cut off his arm. Dong Guangyi shouted. Zheng Donglai hesitated for a moment. Dong Guangyi quickly said, It'll be too late if we don't cut it now. Swoosh! His long blade flashed and cut off Zheng Donglai's right arm. Zheng Donglai angrily glared at Dong Guangyi as his right arm fell to the ground. Dong Guangyi hurriedly said, If we don't cut off your arm, you'll lose your life. Do you want your life or your arm? He knew that Zheng Donglai must have thought that he was taking the opportunity to take revenge. He thought that if Chu Li could resist for so long, so could he. However, he did not know that it was not normal for Chu Li to resist for so long. Zheng Donglai would not last more than a few breaths. Chu Li had a chance to breathe, and the God Prohibition seal had loosened. Relying on the remaining supreme titanium scripture and the inner energy secretly replenished by Sun Mingyue, it was enough to break it. The force on his body slowly circulated and grew stronger. A smile gradually appeared on his face. He had been passively beaten up. The wheel of fortune had turned. It was his turn now. Zheng Donglai's face was pale as he stared at Chu Li. They could feel Chu Li's rapidly rising strength. It was obvious that he was about to break the God Prohibition seal. This made the 3 enlightened masters feel a little hopeless. If they could not kill him under the God Prohibition seal, they would not be able to survive after the God Prohibition seal was broken. Zheng Donglai's eyes focused, and he made up his mind. He fiercely pounced on Chu Li and punched with both fists. Chu Li, you will die today. Chu Li suddenly felt a deep sense of danger. He immediately retreated to get away from him. Zheng Donglai sneered. His body suddenly expanded, and he turned into a stream of light that shot toward Chu Li. Then he exploded. Bang! An earth-shattering sound was heard. Zheng Donglai's body had already been smashed into pieces. An extremely overbearing force pierced into Chu Li's body. Chu Li spat out a mouthful of blood in the air. He was seriously injured. When he landed, his limbs were weak and he could not stand. All the supreme, true, supreme titanium scripture was activated to break the God prohibition seal. Without the supreme, indestructible body of Vajra, the heaven-killing scripture's layer of protection could not stop Zheng Donglai's explosive force. Dong Guangyi and the blade light turned into a waterfall and swept over at an incredible speed. Sun Faxing also burned his body and struck with his most powerful attack. Sun Mingyue also shot over like a flame. She was prepared to block in front of Chu Li. Chapter 1844. Chu Li looked up to the sky and laughed. The spiritual energy in the sky was like a river that flowed backward and fell on him. Under the vast, true, supreme Vajra scripture's internal energy, the supreme Vajra invincible body was activated. The sun's true liquid was refined in the blink of an eye, and the supreme Vajra invincible body became even purer than before. He clapped his palms together. Two golden lights fell from the sky and hit Sun Faxing and Dong Guangyi. Before the two golden lights hit them, they turned into golden palm prints that hit their chests. It was the supreme titanium palm. Bam! The two of them were sent flying. He easily dodged Sun Mingyue's attack and shouted, "Leader Sun, for the sake of our friendship, it's not too late for you to leave now." "Impossible." Sun Mingyue was completely relieved and scoffed. "You're an arrow at the end of its flight, too." Chu Li laughed. "An arrow at the end of its flight? Let's see who's at the end of its flight then." The three of them activated their secret skills. After such a long time, the secret skills were about to run out. They would be the unlucky ones then. Even without the Sky Regicide Sword, he could still defeat them. "Chu Li, don't be too full of yourself," Dong Guangyi said. "Even if we die today, we'll drag you down with us." Chu Li stepped into the void and lightly clapped his palms again. "The three of you don't have the determination to perish together. Unlike His Majesty, the Zheng dynasty's emperor, his death was not worth it." What a pity. Although he said it was a pity, he did not feel it was a pity at all. Instead, he felt that it was a good thing that he died. Once he died, the Zheng dynasty would be well-behaved and the war between the Zheng dynasty and the Ji dynasty could be avoided. One person's death in exchange for the safety of millions, it was worth it. The two golden lights hit Dong Guangyi and Sun Faxing and went around Sun Mingyue. Bam bam. The supreme titanium palm sent the two of them flying again. Sun Mingyue stomped her feet and scoffed. "Chu Li, what's the meaning of this? Are you trying to sow discord between us?" Chu Li smiled. "Leader Sun, you're too insensible. My good intentions are met with such suspicion." "Good intentions? Oomph." Sun Mingyue sneered. Sun Faxing and Dong Guangyi, who had spat out a mouthful of blood after landing on the ground, could not tell if they were real or fake, but they could not see any flaws either. Moreover, Sun Mingyue was still with them, so it was obvious that she was indeed prepared to go down the dark path, which might have something to do with her grandmaster's death. With the death of his grandmaster, the friendship between the two would fade and they would become enemies. Chu Li was also having a headache. Now that Jing Niaoyun was dead, he would have a feud with the Holy Church of Light. Even if Sun Mingyue did not hate him, it would be very difficult for him to join forces with Sun Mingyue to fight against the enemy in the future. Just thinking about it made him feel lost. "Watch my fist." Sun Mingyue threw out a divine light fist. Chu Li also used the supreme Vajra palm. Bam! Sun Mingyue took a step back, but Chu Li was as steady as a rock. Sun Mingyue hurriedly threw a punch, but due to her hasty punch, she did not have enough strength and was sent flying by Chu Li. Chu Li smiled. "Are you satisfied now, cult leader Sun?" Sun Mingyue snorted in his mind. "Why aren't you leaving yet? I might as well get rid of them all." Chu Li said. Sun Mingyue said, "If they really go all out, you might not be able to withstand it. It's better not to lose the bigger picture because of small gain." Chu Li said, "I haven't gone all out yet." Since the Sky Regaining Sword could be restrained by the Black Tortoise Shield, he gave up and wanted to kill the two enlightened masters fair and square. Compared to the Vajra Palm, the Supreme Vajra Palm was much more powerful. Every hit of the Vajra Palm was an attack of the body's inner energy, But the supreme Vajrapalm was 10 times the strength of the body's inner energy. It was equivalent to activating the Vajrapalm after activating the sacrificial divine power. Moreover, the palm energy of the supreme Vajrapalm was several times purer than the Vajrapalm. It was directly converted from the spiritual energy of the Grandmaster, so it was obvious how powerful it was. He threw one hit after another in a continuous and overbearing manner. Sun Faxing and Dong Guangyi could not even lift their heads as they were continuously slapped away. Dong Guangyi secretly regretted that he should not have used the secret technique so quickly, causing him to be unable to keep up with the current situation. He suddenly took out a jade porcelain bottle and poured out 3 pills. He consumed one and tossed the other 2 to Sun Mingwei and Sun Faxing. Chu Li suddenly grabbed the pill that was tossed to Sun Mingwei and held it in his palm to examine it. He chuckled and said, "What kind of ferocious medicine is this?" "Your Majesty, this is the energy recovery pill," Dong Guangyi said. "It can instantly restore one's cultivation level." Sun Faxing consumed it without hesitation and immediately felt the inner energy in his body surging. His originally weak body gradually became stronger, and the spiritual energy in his surroundings surged again. It was no longer lifeless and weak like before. Chu Li smiled and said, "Young Master Dong, you really have a lot of treasures. This is the last treasure." Dong Guangyi scoffed, and his heart skipped a beat. He felt that Chu Li's gaze was a little strange, as if a robber had seen a treasure. It was really scary. Chu Li shook his head and said, "Doesn't look like it." Sun Faxing had been silent and rarely spoke. He also had doubts about killing Chu Li, but because of Chu Li's identity in the Ji dynasty, if he could be killed in advance, there would be no more obstacles to taking over the Ji dynasty. This was related to national affairs and not personal grudges. Dong Guangyi's aura surged again, and he sneered at Chu Li. "Chu Li, don't be too happy. One day, I'll beat you up until you're looking for your teeth on the ground. Goodbye." As soon as he finished speaking, he disappeared in a flash. Sun Faxing saw this and disappeared in a flash too. Chu Li was stunned and looked at Sun Mingwei. Sun Mingwei shook her head and said, "As expected." After Chu Li broke the God Prohibition seal, no one could stop him anymore. It was impossible for the 3 of them to kill Chu Li. They were afraid that they would be killed by Chu Li at the last moment. Therefore, it was best for them to leave and wait for another chance. Chu Li laughed. Strong start, but weak finish. No matter what, they had killed Zheng Donglai and completed their goal. As for being ambushed, it was expected and they were not angry. Moreover, they had taken advantage of the situation in the end. However, they had to think of a way to kill Dong Guangyi. This was because he had the mysterious tortoise shield that could withstand the sky regicide sword. This mysterious tortoise shield was most likely left behind by a supreme spirit beast. To be able to obtain such a magical item, one's luck was extraordinary. It seemed that Dong Guangyi's luck was extremely good, even better than Chu Li's. It was enviable. With such exuberant luck, it would be difficult to kill him. There would always be a chance to turn danger into safety, but he could not be killed no matter what. Even if his martial arts were better than his, he could not be killed. This must be an extremely unpleasant feeling. Chu Li frowned and pondered, thinking of a foolproof plan. "What are you thinking about?" Sun Mingwei asked. Chu Li sighed. "Your Grandmaster is dead. How are you going to explain this to the Grandmaster?" "Grandmaster committed suicide. What am I supposed to explain?" Sun Mingwei said calmly. "Don't worry, I won't blame it on you. It was Grandmaster who took the initiative to kill Chu Li. He even took the initiative to perish together. Should he blame Chu Li for not obediently waiting for death?" Chu Li smiled. "Thank you. Without your help, it would have been dangerous." Sun Mingwei glared at him. He did not listen to her advice. He knew that there was a tiger in a mountain, but he still went ahead. This made her very angry. Chu Li said, "After this, I will kill my way to the Li dynasty's imperial palace and destroy Sun Faxing." He carefully looked at Sun Mingwei. He already knew that Sun Mingwei was Sun Faxing's illegitimate daughter. This cannot be hidden from others. When the 2 of them stood together, they gave off the impression that they were father and daughter. Chapter 1845. Chu Li said, "If you really don't want to, then forget it. It's up to you whether you want to kill him or not. It has nothing to do with me," Sun Mingwei said coldly. Chu Li shook his head. "Looks like it's better not to kill him. Would you do that if you cripple your elders for the sake of the young?" Sun Mingwei stared at him. Chu Li said, "What's wrong with sparing his life? He'll still suffer when he reaches the Outland. There's a war with the Azura realm there. An enlightened master will probably have to go to the battlefield. It's better to stay here." Sun Mingwei scoffed. "Do what you have to do. Don't worry about me." Chu Li smiled and said nothing. Sun Mingwei said, "I'll leave first. Don't go to the Great Light Peak just yet." Chu Li nodded slowly. Sun Mingwei stood beside the forest and looked up at the sky. A gust of wind blew and her white clothes fluttered. She looked like an otherworldly fairy who wanted to ride the wind and fly away. Chu Li had an urge to reach out and grab her so that she wouldn't leave. He could feel the loneliness in Sun Mingyue's heart, but he could not get over it. She was too lonely. There was no one in the Holy Church of Light who could talk to her freely. She could not speak her mind and had to keep everything to herself. Fortunately, she had Li Meng, who could relieve her of her loneliness. "I'm leaving." Sun Mingwei waved her hand and disappeared. Chu Li looked in the direction she disappeared and sighed. He shook his head and left. The next moment, he returned to the evergreen forest of 100,000 Hills. He found some pine seeds in the forest and felt the lifespan contained in them. Although they were not as good as the evergreen pine, they still had a lot of lifespan. One pine ball could absorb 100 years of lifespan. He found dozens of pine balls and filled a bag. When he returned to the public house, he handed it to Xueling and asked her to dig out the pine seeds. Xueling took the bag of pine balls and smiled. "Master, do you like pine seeds?" Chu Li shook his head. "Don't cook them unless they're useful." "Yes." Xueling smiled. Chu Li disappeared again and appeared at the ice pool. The little vermilion bird was standing next to the ice pool. It was taking a nap on a piece of ice out of boredom. When it saw Chu Li, it glanced at him lazily and ignored him. Chu Li smiled and waved his hand, then stood in front of the ice pool. This time, he was going to try to raise the grades of the Azure Dragon and the Origin Devouring Tortoise. After witnessing the Mystic Tortoise Shield, he realized that a spirit beast's power should not be underestimated. If he could activate the two spirit beasts to the Supreme Grade, he would not need to do anything himself. The Golden Dragon and the Mystic Tortoise alone would be able to dominate the world. When his master Zhou Dunley ascended to become a heavenly deity, he upgraded his dragon to a gold dragon, which gave him a glimmer of hope. He had asked his master, Zhou Dunley, about how he was able to upgrade the purple dragon to a gold dragon because the dragon itself had a fortuitous encounter. It had eaten a treasure of heaven and earth, but it was unable to completely digest it, so it was stuck at the purple dragon's grade. When he ascended to the enlightened realm, the spiritual energy from the heavens beyond the heavens descended upon him. And when he became an enlightened realm god, Zilong obtained this spiritual energy, and with the help of his enlightened realm dragon taming art, he was able to catalyze the natural resources he ate in one fell swoop. Thus, the purple dragon leaped into the golden dragon. Most of the credit could not be attributed to him. So, if an enlightened realm god wanted to upgrade a spirit beast to the supreme grade, it would only be possible if they had a fortuitous encounter like his purple dragon. Even so, Chu Li believed that with his current cultivation level, it would not be a problem for him to upgrade the Azure Dragon to a purple dragon, and the Origin Devouring Tortoise would be able to upgrade it to a Mystic Origin Tortoise. With the help of 2 rank 1 spirit beasts, his power would increase greatly. He would no longer have to fight alone like before, where he would be ambushed at every turn and would have to fight against several people at once. With the help of the 2 spirit beasts, he could also ambush others. The thought of it made him excited, and he could not wait to upgrade his spirit beast. The ice pool was silent. Through the observation of the omniscient mirror, he saw that both beasts had fallen into a deep sleep, and his power was slowly increasing. After some thought, he leaped into the ice pool and went to the Azure Dragon's side. He rode on its back, and the little beast in his mind began to open its eyes. Suddenly, A strange force emerged from his dantian and circulated along the route of the dragon taming technique, turning into the inner energy of the dragon taming technique. Once the little beast closed its eyes, this strange force would be hidden in the depths of his dantian, as if it had never appeared before. The heart technique he created was based on the method of the heavenly demonic power, and it could completely conceal the inner energy. This was also to avoid the senses of the spirit beasts, or else once it appeared in 100,000 hills, it would become a target, and all the spirit beasts would be able to sense it. The inner energy of the dragon taming technique became richer. After all, the inner energy of an enlightened realm god was different, and it could not be mentioned in the same breath as the Grandmaster's boundary. Moreover, he was circulating the perfected body technique of the dragon taming technique, which was supplemented by referring to the other two heart techniques. Once the inner energy of the dragon taming technique entered the Azure Dragon's body, the force of the Azure Dragon that was originally circulating slowly suddenly sped up, and the speed of improvement suddenly skyrocketed by more than 10 times. As he continuously injected the dragon taming technique, the speed of improvement was still increasing, and it even reached 10 times, 100 times. The improvement that originally needed 100 years now only needed a year. Even so, Chuli still felt that it was slow. The lifespan of a dragon was long, and even if he cultivated the ageless longevity technique, it was impossible for him to have such a long life. He could not afford to waste it, so he kept injecting the dragon taming technique and kept increasing the speed. The scales of the Azure Dragon began to slowly fall off. One by one, the scales that were as warm as jade slowly left its body and slowly fell to the bottom of the pool. The clear bottom of the pool was reflected in a green light, and it looked like a dream. After the scales of the Azure Dragon fell off, it quickly grew another purple scale, and as it fell off, it grew another. When the green scales on its body had completely fallen off, it had all turned into purple scales, and from an Azure Dragon to a purple dragon. The appearance of the purple dragon changed, and it became thicker. Originally, it could be hugged, but now it could not be hugged. Chuli had been focused on circulating the dragon taming technique, and he had neglected the passage of time. The dragon opened its eyes, and although the light was gentle, it contained a vast majesty and pressure. It did not come from the spiritual force, but from the energy of its soul. This was the powerful talent of the dragon clan, and with each evolution, the soul would become stronger by several times. Chuli reckoned that the god-punishing thunder sword could not hurt it now, and the energy of its soul was only slightly inferior to the spirit tiger. Chuli reached out and touched its back, and his voice rang in its mind. "You've finally reached rank 1. Work harder and strive to reach supreme grade as soon as possible." Supreme grade? The purple dragon's voice rang in Chuli's mind, and its voice was thick and powerful. "It's not that easy to become a golden dragon," Chuli said. "If we work hard together, we'll eventually become a golden dragon." The purple dragon nodded slowly. At this moment, the vitality-devouring tortoise had already woken up, and it gently floated to his side. Chuli smiled and reached out to touch its shell, and then his newly created inner energy circulated along the route of the black tortoise power. 10 days later, when Chuli woke up, he saw that the vitality-devouring tortoise had shrunk to the size of a palm. It was small and exquisite, and it did not match the rank of a rank 1 spirit beast like the vitality tortoise. It was hard to believe that it could be a threat to humans. After some thought, Chuli decided to leave the 2 spirit beasts in the 100,000 hills. After becoming a rank 1 spirit beast, they would have the ability to protect themselves, and they would no longer need to stay in the ice pool. They could venture into the 100,000 hills, and they might come across some exotic minerals and earthly treasures. After consuming them, they could quickly advance their ranks. However, these exotic minerals and earthly treasures were usually guarded by spirit beasts, and it was inevitable that they would have to fight. Chuli was relieved that the 2 spirit beasts were traveling together, and if they could not win, they could run away. Chapter 1846. Chuli sat down in the gazebo and exhaled. With the two spirit beasts, he was emboldened and less stressed. Even if they were tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of miles away, as long as he called them in his heart, the two spirit beasts would rush over. This gave him a lot of confidence. A rank 1 spirit beast was more powerful than an enlightened master. With these two spirit beasts, he would not be afraid even if he was surrounded. Last time outside Saint's Peace City of the Zheng Dynasty, if the two spirit beasts had helped, they would have killed all of them. Young master, the Ji Dynasty lost the battle. Shui curtsied. Her white robe fluttered and her fragrance wafted. Chuli was stunned and asked, "Who defeated the Ji Dynasty?" "Of course, it was the Zheng Dynasty," Shui said. Chuli frowned. "The Zheng Dynasty did not retreat?" "No." Shui shook her head. "Young master, although you killed the Zheng Dynasty's emperor, the Zheng Dynasty did not retreat. The new emperor was even more agitated and wanted to destroy the Ji Dynasty to avenge Zheng Donglai." Chuli looked thoughtfully in the direction of the Zheng Dynasty. It seemed that he had underestimated Zheng Donglai. Before the siege began, he had already made arrangements for the aftermath. Therefore, he was able to perish without any worries. Zheng Donglai's successor must have received instructions from him. Zheng Donglai's son succeeded the throne? Chuli asked. Shui said, "It's his younger brother, Zheng Shilai." Zheng Shilai. Chuli was thinking about the information about Zheng Shilai. This Zheng Shilai was said to be a playboy. He did not make a name for himself among the princes of the imperial family. He was unrestrained all day long and did not do proper work. Moreover, he often acted out of line and was unexpected. He was the complete opposite of Zheng Donglai. Zheng Donglai was talented and had a calm and generous personality. He had studied hard since he was young and had been apprenticed to several masters. On the other hand, Zheng Shilai was like an ignorant and incompetent playboy. It was hard to believe that Zheng Donglai would pass the throne to Zheng Shilai. Did King Ping fight? Chuli asked. Shui shook her head. King Ping is the crown prince. He can't fight easily. Moreover, King Ping requested a fight, but the emperor did not agree. Chuli frowned. It seemed that because of the empowerment, they did not want King Ping to fight, which led to their defeat. King Ping was the only true general of the Ji Dynasty. The rest were not considered generals. They were not capable enough to take on such a great responsibility. Shui Ling said, "We've lost 10,000 men in this battle. The border has been breached, and we've advanced 100 miles. Chu Li's expression darkened. 10,000 people was not a small number. Even though it was only a drop in the bucket compared to the great Ji Dynasty's army, when he thought about how many people would be sad and in pain if 10,000 families were destroyed, his heart skipped a beat as if it was weighed down by a huge rock. King Ping has arrived at the border and led his army to stop the Ji Dynasty's border army. Shui Ling furrowed her brows and said, "But we managed to maintain the situation and stop the Zheng Dynasty from advancing. It's going to be very difficult to recover the lost land." Chuli said slowly, "I will go and take a look." He glanced at Shui Ling. Shui Ling said, "Master, I also just received the news." Chuli sighed. 10,000 soldiers, 10,000. His expression became even more gloomy as he waved his hand and disappeared. He did not appear by King Ping's side. Instead, he went to the border between the Zheng Dynasty and the Ji Dynasty. Since he had traveled to the Zheng Dynasty's Saint's Peace City previously, he was already very familiar with the roads between the Ji Dynasty and the Zheng Dynasty. He could arrive at the border of the Ji Dynasty and the Zheng Dynasty with just a shift. Everywhere he looked, there were ruins and corpses everywhere. His expression became even gloomier, as if it had frozen over. The corpses in the villages could be seen clearly. They were all killed by weapons. Moreover, they were all innocent people who wanted to escape but were hunted down. He could imagine the helplessness and despair of these villagers. He could clearly see the resentment condensed in the sky above the villages. He stood in the void and chanted the rebirth mantra to dispel the resentment, and send these unwilling souls into reincarnation. He swept past the villages at an incredible speed. There were no survivors. The Zheng dynasty's soldiers were extremely ruthless in their killings and were determined not to leave a single person alive. He followed his intuition and soon arrived at a mountain peak. There was a sect on this peak that was going through the calamity of annihilation. Out of the 300 people in the sect, only 30 or so people were left. They were all women and children. There were 100 grandmasters who besieged this sect. Each of them had a murderous aura that was almost tangible. It was obvious that they had killed many people. Moreover, they cultivated the military core technique. Not only did the murderous aura not harm their foundation, but also help their cultivation speed. This military core technique relied on killing to improve. The more people they killed, the faster and stronger they would become. However, this hard technique had a major drawback, which was that their lifespan was extremely short. They only had a lifespan of 100 years, which was even worse than that of ordinary people. In the past, very few people cultivated this military core technique. Most of them were outlaws who would cultivate it for a moment of glory. They would rather be brilliant for a moment than be mediocre for the rest of their lives. They also knew that it was difficult for them to survive in the military because they were too weak. Now, however, the military core technique was very popular because everyone could enter the Grandmaster's boundary after death. Cultivating this hard technique was a shortcut to enter the Grandmaster's boundary. Chuli looked coldly at these Grandmasters. He saw that their eyes were cold and emotionless as they stared at the women and children. He slowly raised his hand to eliminate them. "Stop!" Chuli shouted. It was like a sudden clap of thunder that exploded in their ears. The 100 Grandmasters were shocked and looked up at the sky. Chuli stood in the void and looked down at them. He said coldly, "You don't even spare the women and children. You don't deserve to be called men." "Enlightened Master," someone exclaimed. Then the Grandmasters calmed down. An enlightened master could not simply attack a Grandmaster. Otherwise, they would be punished by the heavenly rules. They did not believe that an enlightened master would break the heavenly rules because of 30 women and children. Otherwise, an enlightened master would have broken the heavenly rules long ago. Chuli looked at them coldly. "Did you guys destroy the few villages around here?" "Yes, we did," a young man shouted. "Who are you?" Chuli said. "Haha, the world's #1 master, Chuli. I've heard so much about you. I heard that you even killed our late emperor." The young man was handsome, but his expression was wild and heroic. He was not afraid of Chuli at all. "I don't know how powerful you are. Unfortunately, Chuli, you don't dare to attack us." Chuli said lightly. "Who said I don't dare to attack?" "Haha, you're an enlightened master. You can't simply attack a grandmaster unless you hurt your blood relatives." The handsome young man laughed. "So, Chuli, no matter how strong your martial arts are, you still can't do anything to us." Chuli flicked his finger. Pop! The handsome young man fell backward. There was already a bloody hole in between his eyebrows. Blood was flowing out. Chuli glanced at the crowd. The 99 Grandmasters' expressions changed. They were calm and fearless. They were already Grandmasters. So what if they died? Wouldn't they still ascend to the Grandmaster's boundary? There is no difference between going to the Grandmaster's boundary now or in the future. It was better to go earlier. They wanted to go to the Grandmaster's boundary to see the beauty there. So, their fear of Chuli disappeared. Instead, they took a step forward and were eager to attack Chuli. Chuli sneered. "Do you think you can ascend to the Grandmaster's boundary if you die in my hands?" "Chuli, what do you mean?" a middle-aged man asked. Chapter 1847. As soon as he said that, the 3 god-punishing thunder swords in his mind split into 99 god-punishing needles and shot out. 99 Grandmasters suddenly screamed and fell to the ground, rolling on the ground. They did not even care about the dirt and dust on their bodies. They no longer had the air of a Grandmaster, and they no longer had the imposing manner of a Grandmaster. Chuli stared at them coldly. He had already seen through their minds, and knew that they used killing as a means of advancement. They were able to advance from the innate mastery's boundary to the Grandmaster's boundary without entering the victorious state to cultivate. Instead, they achieved it by killing. Tens of thousands of Ji Dynasty soldiers and civilians had died in their hands. Xueling told him that the great Ji Dynasty's army had lost tens of thousands of people. These were only the soldiers. Compared to the soldiers, the Zheng Dynasty had lost hundreds of thousands of civilians. The border between the Zheng Dynasty and the Great Ji Dynasty was 1,000 miles long. If they were to push forward for another 100 miles, the entire Ji Dynasty's civilians in this region would be massacred. Among them were many martial arts masters and sections. Nowadays, martial arts were flourishing in the world. It was common for sects to have a few sects within 100 miles. However, these small sects were all destroyed by them, and their belongings were looted. Regardless of whether it was men or women, children or the elderly, no one was spared. Although there was no such thing as mercy in a war between two armies, to treat these commoners so cruelly just for the sake of cultivating martial arts was too cold-blooded and cruel. Chuli did not hesitate to kill them. Killing could improve one's mental cultivation method very quickly, so they were unable to extricate themselves and killed the common people like pigs and dogs. Leaving such experts in the world would only bring disaster to the world, so it was better to kill them as soon as possible. When he thought of this, his heart hardened as he watched the 99 grandmasters wailing on the ground without a change in his expression. Not far away, more than 30 women and children looked at Chu Li timidly. Although Chu Li had saved them, they were grateful but did not dare to approach him. Chu Li's appearance was too terrifying, as if he could devour them. "I'll fight you to the death." A young man leapt up. Chu Li sneered. Without moving, the god-punishing thunder sword shot out. Bang! The youth's head suddenly exploded, and white brain matter mixed with blood splattered everywhere. The young man fell to the ground, motionless. He was already dead. The grandmasters looked up at the sky. However, the gate of heaven did not appear for a long time. His dead companion did not ascend to the heavens beyond heaven. Their hearts were instantly filled with fear. What Chuli said was true. If they were killed by him, their souls would scatter and they would not be able to ascend to heaven. This was the thing that they were most afraid of. Death was not scary, but the most frightening thing was that they would have to bid farewell to this boring world and not be able to ascend to the realm beyond heaven. Thinking of this, they began to think of committing suicide. Chu Li said calmly, "Don't think that you'll be able to ascend to heaven just by killing yourselves. You've been struck by my god-slaying sword, and your souls have been damaged. You can no longer ascend to the Grandmaster's boundary. It's better for you to give up." Everyone was furious and desperate. They endured the pain and pounced on Chu Li. Chu Li stood in the void and looked down at them. He sneered, and the god-punishing thunder sword turned into a god-punishing needle again. The Grandmasters screamed and fell to the ground again. They held their heads and rolled around in pain. The pain was unbearable, but their bodies were already weak. They could not even commit suicide. The pain this time was even worse than before, but they could not pass out. They could only endure the pain. Chu Li's face was as hard as stone. His eyes were as cold as ice. There was a sneer at the corner of his mouth. When did they think about pain when they killed innocent people? If he did not make them suffer so much that they could not die, how could he face those people who died tragically? "Great hero Chu, you're so merciful. Please let us go." A middle-aged man pounced on Chu Li and knelt on the ground. He banged his head on the ground so hard that his forehead was bleeding. He pleaded loudly. Chu Li was unmoved. He did not even look at him. He saw how this middle-aged man tortured and killed others in his mind. When they annihilated the sects in the martial arts world, they would encounter resistance. They were usually the final victors, and they would torture and kill the losers. Compared to their methods, Chu Li only gave them a small punishment. Therefore, all of these people deserved to die. They deserve to die 1,000 times. "Great hero Chu, we won't dare to do it again." Another middle-aged man knelt on the ground and begged for mercy. "Great hero Chu, We can help you deal with the Zheng dynasty. As long as great hero Chu is merciful and let us go. Yes, yes, great hero Chu will definitely follow your orders. More than half of the grandmasters knelt on the ground to express their loyalty. Chu Li stood in the void with his hands behind his back. He looked into the distance as his white robe fluttered. Great hero Chu, please spare us. Chu Li shook his head secretly. These people were soldiers. They had been through blood, but they were begging for mercy. It was clear that the Grandmaster's boundary was a great temptation to them. They could even abandon everything to go to the Grandmaster's boundary. Chu Li stood with his hands behind his back and ignored them. When they begged for mercy, their pain became worse and did not ease at all. After an hour, they gradually lost hope. They knew that Chu Li had a heart of stone and would not spare them. Therefore, their despair turned into endless anger. They did not care about how scary Chu Li was and started cursing. Chu Li, you son of a b*****. Chu Li, you'll die a horrible death. Chu Li, just you wait. I won't let you go even if I become a ghost. Bastard Chu, you'll die a horrible death. Your wife will die a horrible death too. Chu Li glanced at them indifferently. The god-punishing thunder sword turned into a god-punishing needle again and shot out. The people screamed again. Their faces were twisted and hideous. They could only scream, but they could not speak. Their eyes rolled back, and only the whites of their eyes could be seen. Even so, they were still awake and could not pass out. Chu Li looked at them calmly. He was not soft-hearted. He would only stop after torturing them for a few days and nights. Only then would he be worthy of the people who died tragically. He looked down at the women and children and said calmly, I'll send you to the back. As he spoke, he waved his sleeve, and 30 women and children flew up. They were all people from the martial arts sects, so they did not scream. The scene in front of them became faster and faster. In the end, there was only a distorted light and shadow. After a while, they arrived outside a towering city. Shuo was already waiting outside the forest with some people. When she saw Chu Li, she greeted him, Master. Settle them down, Chu Li said. Shuo nodded lightly. Chu Li suddenly disappeared and returned to his original position. There was another group of grandmasters. There were also 100 of them. Chu Li frowned. This military centering technique was really amazing. These 100 grandmasters were also successful. It was very likely that they had cultivated it in this battle. These 100 grandmasters were helping, trying to relieve the pain of their companions. They all channeled their energy, but it was useless. The grandmasters were still in so much pain that they could not speak. They could only hold on to their companions tightly, hoping that their companions would release them. However, they could not speak. Chu Li used the omniscient mirror and saw what these masters were doing in their minds. He did not hesitate to shoot the god-punishing needles. Suddenly, screams were heard. Chu Li looked coldly at almost 200 grandmasters. Chapter 1848. Stop! An angry roar came from afar. The roar was like thunder. Then, 2 gray shadows floated over and appeared in front of him in the blink of an eye. It was 2 gray-robed elders. Chu Li narrowed his eyes. The 2 gray-robed elders were celestial beings, rank 3 celestial beings. Chu Li said, Zheng Dynasty's celestial beings? Who are you? A burly gray-robed elder asked. What are you doing? They glanced at the 200 grandmasters and were secretly shocked. 200 grandmasters were extremely shocking. Only an enlightened master could suppress the power formed by them. They cannot do it. Chu Li said, Chu Li, you're Chu Li. The 2 gray-robed elders' expressions changed slightly. Chu Li scoffed. It seems like you've heard of my name. Chu Li, what are you doing? The 2 gray-robed elders forced themselves to ask. Chu Li said, Why do I need to explain to you? Kill yourselves. Since you've heard of my name, you know what I'm capable of. If you don't kill yourselves, your souls will be destroyed and completely disappear from this world. Chu Li, you're hurting their souls, aren't you? The 2 gray-robed elders' hearts skipped a beat. They knew what he said was true. Chu Li did have a way to make people's souls disappear. Some celestial beings had experienced it before, and it was truly terrifying. Chu Li said they deserve to die. Since they deserve to die, how can they ascend to the Grandmaster? It's better for them to disappear completely. Chu Li, do you know the consequences of doing this? The burly, gray-robed elder said, We're warning you out of good intentions. We don't want you to be unaware of the trouble you've caused. Consequences? Chu Li chuckled. It's nothing more than the Grandmaster being unhappy. The Grandmaster is in urgent need of manpower. These 200 people are not a small force. If you kill them just like that, the Grandmaster will definitely be furious. Chu Li, you should have experienced the wrath of the Grandmaster before. I advise you to let them go. Just kill them and put their souls into the Grandmaster, the burly elder said in a low voice. Chu Li laughed. I've experienced the wrath of the Grandmaster. It's really scary. Compared to the wrath of the Grandmaster, I'd rather kill these scums. You don't have to. Yuan Mao sang. Badgerming Mao Yuan. Zheng, Chu Li, you will regret this. Another gray-robed elder said in a deep voice. Chu Li calmly said, Let's talk about regret in the future. At least I'm happy now. Disorderly melancholy, Zheng, the two gray-robed old men, looked at each other and sighed. Suddenly, they patted their chests and turned into a streak of light that shot into the sky. A door of light slowly appeared in the sky. It was so vast that it made people want to kneel down and worship it. The Grandmasters who were screaming and groaning on the ground raised their heads with all their might and widened their eyes. This was the holy land that they yearned for. They were only one step away, but this one step was so far away that they could not reach it. They were in pain, unwilling, desperate, and angry. They wanted to fight with all their might, but they were powerless. Their bodies were so weak that they could not exert any strength. Otherwise, they would have killed themselves long ago. 09, small? Chu Li snorted softly. These two Devis were very straightforward, saving him the trouble. When a Grandmaster saw that the high and mighty celestial being had obediently committed suicide just because of one sentence from Chu Li, they felt even more pained and helpless. Was this the power of the world's #1 master? Chu Li looked up at the sky and frowned. He felt a wave of malice coming from the sky, and a chill penetrated his brow. After frowning, he suddenly shot out hundreds of God-killing needles in his mind 3 times in a row. Ah! The people screamed, and then their heads exploded one after another. They died completely. Just as Chu Li finished doing this, a stream of light suddenly fell from the sky and appeared behind him. A glowing figure appeared and lightly hit him with his palm. Chu Li felt an immense killing intent and immense power. His palm was as light as a feather, but it felt like a mountain was pressing down on him. Bang! A golden light shot down from the sky and met the light palm. The glowing figure disappeared in a flash and appeared behind Chu Li in the next moment. Another palm hit him. Chu Li already knew that this was a celestial being sent by the Grandmaster to kill him. It seemed that killing 200 Grandmasters at once and not being able to ascend to the Grandmaster had completely angered the Grandmaster. An enlightened master could not casually attack a Grandmaster, or else they would be punished by the heavenly rules. He defied the natural order and became a god, so he was not bound by the heavenly rules. However, the Grandmaster wanted to restrain him. They did not want an enlightened master who did not care about the heavenly rules. However, he did not accept the Grandmaster's bestowment, so the Grandmaster did not have a direct method of punishment. They could only send a celestial being to punish him, unlike other enlightened masters who could not escape with just a thought. Chu Li thought as he waved the Supreme Vajra palm to block the attack. The power of this celestial being even surpassed the second-rank Lung Zhifei and Song Sizu. It was very likely to reach the first rank. The first rank was already the top level in the Grandmaster. As far as he knew, there was no supreme rank. After many inquiries, he found out that if a normal Grandmaster died and ascended to the heavens, they could quickly recover their cultivation level to level 9. As for those Grandmasters who did not die and ascended to the heavens, their cultivation level could not be recovered quickly. They were just ordinary people and needed to cultivate from the beginning. However, if a certain price was paid, these grandmasters could also quickly restore their cultivation to the 9th rank or even higher. However, this price was usually paid by big sects or only during special times. After an enlightened master died and stepped into the grandmaster, they could quickly restore their cultivation to the 3rd rank. Rank 2 and 1st rank required hard cultivation. The celestial beings would be weakened when they descended to this world. After all, they could not control the spiritual energy as easily as they could in the Grandmaster. It was difficult to control the spiritual energy from the Grandmaster when the distance was too far. Moreover, the spiritual energy in this world was very different from the Grandmaster's spiritual energy. The strength of a 1st rank celestial being could not be used. However, Chuli could seize the spiritual energy from the Grandmaster through the life and death scripture. Coupled with the supreme Vajra scripture, he could control the spiritual energy from the Grandmaster more freely than a celestial being, so he had a big advantage. When the celestial being saw that his palm energy could not hurt Chuli, he sneered. Chuli could not see his shadow clearly. He was shrouded in a dazzling light. He could only see his hands and feet through the hazy outline. He could not see his face, but this sneer was full of disdain. It was obvious that he still had a trump card. Chuli was vigilant. He no longer tested the power of a 1st rank celestial being. He directly pulled out his sword, and 500 years of his life turned into a sword. Bam, 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 bam. The celestial being slapped several times in a row. His body kept retreating, avoiding the sword. Chuli's expression changed slightly. He did not expect the sky-killing sword to be blocked. He had nothing to say about the black tortoise shield before, but the celestial being could block it with his palm energy. It seemed that his sky-killing sword needed to be deepened. If he condensed 1,000 years of life in one strike, he would not be able to block it. Sky-killing sword. The celestial being sneered. The light around his body shone brightly. All the light condensed in his palm, revealing his true appearance. This was a young man with an ordinary appearance. He had a straight nose and thin lips. When he slightly pursed his lips, he showed a harsh coldness. Chuli's expression was solemn. He faced this slow palm attack as if he was facing a great enemy. Chapter 1849. Chu Li's body shrunk as he performed the sacrificial power. His inner energy flowed 10 times faster, and the extraction of spiritual energy from Outland sped up. A golden beam of light fell from the sky onto Chu Li's right palm. His right palm was enveloped by the golden beam of light, and it quickly absorbed the golden light. His right palm was shrouded by the golden light, and it condensed again and again, as if it had become a palm made of gold. Chu Li pushed his right palm forward. The golden palm collided head-on with the palm that was overflowing with colorful lights. Bang! Chu Li was sent flying. The golden right palm fell apart and turned into rays of golden light that disappeared into the air. He spat out a mouthful of blood in the air. He was secretly amazed at the depth of the celestial's inner energy, but he continued to move his palm. Suddenly, another ray of golden light fell from the sky and shot straight at the young man, turning into a golden palm and hitting him. The young man stopped and frowned. Chu Li continued to attack, and the supreme Vajra palms kept hitting the young man. The young man's face darkened. His pursuit of Chu Li was constantly interrupted, and he could not catch up to Chu Li. He lost the initiative and allowed Chu Li to stand in the air and attack him. He wanted to avoid it, but the supreme Vajra palms were too fast. They moved according to Chu Li's will, and the golden light would condense into palm prints that never missed. The young man's face darkened. Suddenly, his body lit up and shot out rays of light again. Chu Li smiled and continued to attack. Even the Celestial was going all out. It was his ability to force a rank 1 Celestial to go all out. Ever since he received the complete inheritance of the Earth Matrix and Reincarnation Scripture, his strength had improved a lot. Bang, 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 bang. The young man suddenly sped up and shot toward Chu Li like a ray of light. In an instant, he was in front of Chu Li with another palm. Bang! Chu Li's right palm turned golden and collided with the palm again. At the same time, he was sent flying. In the air, the supreme Vajra scripture stopped and quickly turned into the Earth Matrix and Reincarnation scripture. He thought to himself that it would be better to combine the supreme Vajra scripture and the Earth Matrix and Reincarnation scripture into one. It was a pity that one could not have it both ways. The inner force of the supreme Vajrapani scripture was refined and pure, while the inner force of the Earth Matrix and Reincarnation scripture was a combination of void and reality, yin and yang. It was very complicated. The two inner forces were polar opposites, so it was extremely difficult to fuse them. After dispelling the young man's palm force, he hurriedly resumed the circulation of the true, supreme Vajra scripture. The Earth Matrix and Reincarnation scripture alone would not be able to stop this young man. Only the true supreme Vajra scripture could activate the supreme Vajra palm and the supreme Vajra invincible body. This young man's cultivation was 2 levels higher than his, but he couldn't do anything to him. This was the power of the supreme Vajra scripture. While he was grateful, he couldn't help but think of Sun Mingwei. Sun Mingwei must be having a hard time at this time. The young man's body suddenly darkened. All the light disappeared, and he disappeared at the same time. The next moment, he suddenly appeared in front of Chu Li and pushed his palms forward. Woo! A dragon's roar sounded. Chu Li did not manage to dodge in time. He could only watch helplessly as the 2 palms struck his chest and sent him flying. He was secretly shocked. This palm technique was really strange. It was shocking that it could hide from his intuition. The pure and overbearing palm force instantly surged into his body and went straight to his chest, about to crush his heart. The palm force that could break through the supreme Vajra invincible body's defense made Chu Li shiver. He hurriedly circulated it. The next moment, he was about to use the heavenly demonic power to avoid the attack on his heart. Suddenly, the little beast in his mind opened its eyes and mouth. The palm force that was about to reach his heart suddenly changed direction and rushed to his mind. It quickly rushed into his mind and went into the little beast's mouth. The little beast squinted its eyes and showed a look of enjoyment, as if it had eaten a delicious meal. Chu Li was stunned. Then he was overjoyed. Such a powerful palm was swallowed by the little beast out of thin air. Moreover, it seemed like the little beast had become a little stronger, as if it was its food. This little beast really surprised him. When the young man saw that Chu Li was stunned, he immediately used the same trick. With a dragon's roar, his palms hit Chu Li's chest again. The palm force went straight to his heart. Just as it was about to reach his heart, it suddenly changed direction and rushed into his mind. Then it was swallowed by the little beast. Bang! Chu Li flew out and spat out a mouthful of blood in the air. He spat out blood and asked with widened eyes, "What martial art is this?" Flying Dragon Slash. The young man sneered. "You should be honored to die under the Flying Dragon Slash." Chu Li gritted his teeth. Flying Dragon Slash. What a Flying Dragon Slash. He suddenly froze in the air and fiercely swung a supreme Vajra palm. The green dragon suddenly disappeared and appeared in front of Chu Li in the next moment. However, the supreme Vajra palm was amazing. It still chased after him and hit his back. The young man gritted his teeth and endured the palm. No matter what, he had to give Chu Li another Flying Dragon Slash and completely suppress him. Otherwise, Chu Li would attack endlessly. It was really a headache. Chu Li spat out another mouthful of blood, but he was secretly happy. After swallowing the 2 palm forces, the little beast's spirit was lifted. Obviously, it was greatly beneficial to it. He flew out backward. The young man saw that Chu Li's aura was weakened and his spirit was lifted. He used a Flying Dragon Slash again. Because the Flying Dragon Slash consumed a lot of inner energy, he was not very good with the spiritual energy of the Outland. After 2 more palm strikes, he needed to rest. However, he believed that as long as he used 2 more palm strikes, he would definitely be able to defeat Chu Li. The Flying Dragon Slash directly cut the heart arteries. Even a first-rank celestial would not be able to withstand it, let alone Chu Li. If Chu Li did not have the little bee's help, he really would not be able to withstand the flying dragon slash. It was indeed powerful to be able to break the supreme Vajra body. However, with the little beast, he showed weakness while accumulating power. He wanted to wait until the young man's inner energy was almost exhausted before giving him a fatal blow. He even wanted to directly destroy his soul and let the Outland know how powerful he was. Woo! The flying dragon slash continued to wreak havoc. Chu Li continued to fly back and forth in the air. He spat out mouthfuls of blood, and his face gradually turned golden. His aura was weak. Seeing that he was about to die, the young man's spirit was lifted, and he used the last flying dragon slash. Woo! Chu Li responded and flew out again. After spitting out blood, he widened his eyes and pointed at him. I will not let you go. Do you think you still have a way out? The young man let out a sigh of relief and did not continue to chase. He took a step forward and landed in front of Chu Li, who had fallen to the ground. He looked down at him. Such a big crime. Do you think the Outland will give you a way out? Why not? Chu Li lay on the ground, facing the sky, and asked with difficulty. Soul destroyed. The young man said coldly. It's impossible even if you want to reincarnate. This is the result of violating the heavenly rules. Chu Li sneered. I am not an enlightened master who was appointed by the Outland. I don't have to follow the rules of the Outland. As long as you are an enlightened master, you must follow the heavenly rules. There are no exceptions. The young man scoffed. If you follow the rules, I could let you live. But you are so unscrupulous and killed grandmasters. This is unforgivable. Chu Li sneered. Is it because I destroyed their souls? It's good that you understand. The young man said in a deep voice. You are a smart person, but you chose to kill yourself. You really cannot live. I will send you on your way. Chapter 1850. Chu Li lunged forward and took the initiative to meet the attack. The young man sneered. His palms remained the same as he hit Chu Li's chest. He was startled and looked down at his abdomen. Chu Li slowly retreated. His face was as pale as paper, and he sheathed the Imperial Sky Sword. This time it was not an act. He was really pale and weak. He tried to use up 600 years of his lifespan and succeeded. It was obvious that the Imperial Sky Sword had advanced a little and its power had greatly increased. However, he only had a few years left after 600 years of his lifespan was taken away. This sudden loss of lifespan was extremely painful. It was as if the body had suddenly aged for a few hundred years and became much weaker. It was no different from being sick. The young man looked down at his abdomen and looked up at Chu Li. His face was full of dissatisfaction. He wanted to mobilize his strength, but he could not. The strength around his body was quickly fading and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Chu Li shook his head. Let me tell you something. Your body and soul will be destroyed, and you won't be able to ascend to the Outland. The young man glared at him and sneered while wiping his mouth. Chu Li, you won't have a good ending. The Grandmaster will hunt you down until you die. No matter how powerful you are, you won't be able to escape from the Grandmaster. Chu Li smiled faintly. All right, I'll wait for them. I'll destroy every one of them. I want to see how many rank 1 Celestials the Outland has and how many can be lost. Not only will the Outland kill you, but they'll also kill your wife. The young man sneered. Chu Li narrowed his eyes and laughed. That depends on their ability. You won't be able to see it. This hit his weak spot. Although Shao Qi's martial arts was strong, she could not stop a rank 1 Celestial. If the Outland really sent a rank 1 Celestial to deal with her, it would be dangerous. It seemed like he had to be more careful. Although Hui Qing was powerful, she was not a rank 1 Celestial. She was probably a rank 2 and could not protect Shao Qi. Chu Li, you're dead. The young man slowly fell to the ground and was silent. There was no light shooting into the sky. His soul had been destroyed. The Imperial Sky Sword was indeed sinister. This sword destroyed his soul, and he completely disappeared from the world. He looked up at the sky and wanted to see if they would send more Celestials. He suddenly frowned and appeared on the Jade Guardian Island of the High Duke's public house. Xiao Qi and Xiao Shi were playing chess when Chu Li appeared out of thin air. Xiao Shi was shocked and glared at him, but she knew that something urgent must have happened. Chu Li reached out and pulled the two women into his arms. Without saying a word, he suddenly disappeared and reappeared in the ice pond the next moment. A gust of wind blew past the clear, mirror-like surface of the pond. It was an indescribably refreshing and pleasant feeling as it brushed against their faces. The two girls were instantly refreshed. The air in the High Duke's public house was very good. Moreover, because of the formation that Chu Li had set up on the Jade Guardian Island, the spiritual force was abundant and the air was even better. However, compared to the air here, it was still a lot worse. Chu Li could clearly feel the pores all over his body twitching. "Why are you here?" Xiao Shi turned her head and sized him up. "Not going to Spirit Crane's Peak. It'll be dangerous. I don't want to implicate them," Chu Li said. Although the two Spirit Cranes of Spirit Crane's Peak were strong, they were not as strong as the Purple Dragon and the Dark Origin Tortoise. He was more at ease with them protecting him. Logically speaking, Celestials would not dare to come to 100,000 Hills. They would definitely die if they came. This was a forbidden area for enlightened masters and Celestials. As he spoke, he looked at the ice pond. The Purple Dragon and the Dark Origin Tortoise were not in there. They had obviously gone to look for treasures. Thus, he called out to them in his heart. Xiao Shi scoffed. "You kill people again?" Chu Li said, "Those animals deserve to die. There are also a few Celestials. I guess there will be more Celestials coming to kill me, or even you. Am I a burden again?" Xiao Qi said. Chu Li shook his head. "They might not attack you, but it's safer for you to come." Xiao Shi said. "Chu Li, why doesn't the Grandmasters let you go?" "Because I'm a different species. I'm not under their control, and I even ruin their plans." Chu Li shook his head. "Then don't provoke them," Xiao Shi said. Chu Li smiled. "If I can't act freely and become a god, won't all my efforts be in vain?" "Act within your means and don't mess around," Xiao Shi said. "The war between the Ji dynasty and the Zheng dynasty isn't something you can interfere with. It's better for you to get out of it." Chu Li smiled. "I thought I could handle it, but now I realize that it's beyond my control. I heard that this war is very important and there are too many interests involved. It's not something you can handle alone." Xiao Shi frowned. "I heard from Lu Yuron that there are many Celestials involved." Chu Li slowly nodded. "Roar." Suddenly, a dragon's roar was heard. Then, a purple silhouette appeared in the sky and was faintly discernible among the clouds. "Is that the Purple Dragon?" Xiao Qi asked softly. Chu Li smiled. "It's my original dragon that I transformed into. It's already so majestic," Xiao Qi exclaimed. Xiao Qi's eyes lit up as she stared at the purple dragon that was leisurely descending. The purple dragon rode on the fog and arrived above them in the blink of an eye. Then, the fog dispersed and the purple dragon suddenly descended. When it was about to reach the ground, it stretched out its claws and gently pushed the purple dragon away. A strong gust of wind blew, and once again, the purple dragon slowly descended. Chu Li shook his head and laughed. This purple dragon was deliberately showing off its ability to control the wind and clouds in front of the two ladies. Xiao Shi turned and asked, "Can I ride it for a spin?" Chu Li replied, "No." The purple dragon was extremely docile in his hands because they had an extraordinary relationship. However, it was very arrogant to others. The pride of the dragon clan was deep in their bones. If it were not for the two ladies' close relationship with him, he would not even bother to get close to them. Xiao Shi rolled her eyes at him, but did not force him. She only stared at the purple dragon curiously. The purple dragon's appearance was indeed different from the white dragon and azure dragon. It was more majestic and ancient, which made people feel respect for it. It was hard to imagine that Chu Li could control such a giant dragon. A ray of light flashed, and a palm-sized mystic origin turtle appeared on Chu Li's shoulder. Xiao Shi and Xiao Qi stared at the mystic origin turtle curiously. Chu Li explained, and the two ladies were amazed. They did not expect such a huge spirit-devouring turtle to shrink to such a small size. It was truly novel. The wonders of a spirit beast were truly beyond imagination. Chu Li said, "Stay here for a few days and wait for the news to die down before going to Goddess Attraction Mountain." Goddess Attraction Mountain was not safe now because the Celestials could arrive. When that time came, even Master and the others would not be able to stop them. After thinking about it, this was the best place. "All right, you can go now." Seo Sure waved her hand and said, "With them here, no one will make things difficult for us. Moreover, the scenery here is great. Bring some daily necessities over. We'll be an isolated cultivation so that we won't be a burden to you." Chu Li nodded. He went back and asked Shuai Ling to prepare everything. Then he brought everything here. There were tents, blankets, clothes, and some toiletries. There was even a small red clay stove for brewing tea and a jade cup for drinking tea. When everything was ready, Chu Li returned to where he was previously. When he appeared, there were already thousands of people around him. "It seems like you're good at managing the army. You're a rare, talented general. Who's your marshal this time?" "Our emperor," the middle-aged general said in a low voice. His heart kept sinking. He had walked the line between life and death so many times that his senses were sharp. He could feel Chu Li's killing intent. He was just a grandmaster. He had no chance of escaping from Chu Li. Chu Li asked, "Zhang Shilai?" "Yes." The middle-aged general nodded. Chu Li nodded slowly. "I want to see how many protectors he has with him this time." He then glanced to the middle-aged general. "You don't want to leave the battlefield, do you?" "That's right. If you want to kill him, then kill him," the middle-aged general said solemnly. Chu Li sighed. "I'm not someone who kills indiscriminately. It's just that if you don't die, the Ji dynasty's soldiers will be the unlucky ones. I have no choice but to cripple you." As soon as he finished speaking, his azure eyes flashed. Suddenly, the god-punishing thunder sword in his mind dispersed and shot toward more than 100 people among the 1,000 people. The middle-aged general and more than 100 people covered their heads and screamed, "Kill!" The anger that the soldiers had been suppressing suddenly burst out. They charged toward Chu Li without fear of death. Chu Li shook his head and stood in the void. He did not dodge the arrows that were shot at him. The arrows that fell like rain bounced off a meter away from Chu Li and fell to the ground. The arrows were useless against him. Chu Li shot more than 100 god-punishing needles again. Another 100 soldiers fell to the ground and screamed. After a while, Chu Li had crippled these 1,000 soldiers. From now on, they could no longer be provoked. If they had the slightest killing intent or sensed killing intent, they would immediately pass out. It was a pity for the middle-aged general. He was the backbone of the Zheng dynasty and a future star general. Chu Li looked at them with satisfaction. He scoffed and suddenly disappeared. The next moment, he appeared outside a military camp. The endless number of tents covered the sky like white clouds in the sky. It was impossible to see the end of it. Fortunately, he had the omniscient mirror to observe the situation, so he did not get lost in these tents and was able to find Zhang Shilai's tent. Zhang Shilai's tent happened to be in the middle of the entire camp. It was where the killing intent condensed. Moreover, with the power of the army, this tent was almost invisible. If he did not have the omniscient mirror and the heavenly star insight skill, he would not have seen this tent. Moreover, this military formation was formed by 100,000 soldiers. The killing intent and blood energy gathered together. With a unique formation, it formed an unpredictable power. No one could fight it alone. Even an enlightened master would not dare to go directly against it. Chu Li stood outside the military formation and pondered, thinking of a way to break it. Every formation had a way to break it. The way to break this military formation was to disrupt its order. As long as the military camp was in chaos, the military formation would be in chaos and its power would be greatly reduced. Therefore, it was common to attack the camp first and then break the formation. He could see Zheng Shilai's tent, but he could not break indirectly. Otherwise, with the suppression of the military formation, he would not be able to use half of his power. Zheng Xilai alone could kill him. However, it was not a good feeling to watch Zheng Xilai sit in the military camp and sit peacefully in the Ji dynasty. Chu Li looked at a void and said, Dong Guangyi, you've got guts. As soon as he finished speaking, Dong Guangyi's figure appeared in the void where he was looking. He was dressed in green and held the black tortoise shield. He laughed proudly. Haha, Chu Li, you got guts. How dare you come here? Chu Li said, I'm just here to see what's going on. All right, I've killed 200 of your grandmasters and 2 celestial beings. They brutally killed innocent people in the Ji dynasty. This is the Zheng dynasty. 200 grandmasters? Dong Guangyi frowned. 200 grandmasters was not a small number. It had a huge impact on the entire army. This was the Zheng dynasty's most important victory in this war. However, it was destroyed by Chu Li. It was really infuriating. Chu Li said, Do you know what they've done? So what if I do, and so what if I don't? Dong Guangyi scoffed. He was extremely resentful towards Chu Li. Chu Li said, If you know, I'll send you to die with them. If you don't, I'll spare your life. You're so arrogant, Dong Guangyi said in disdain. Chu Li, we know each other now. You don't have the ability to send me to heaven. Chu Li chuckled and shook his head. Do you think I've sent them to heaven? Dong Guangyi frowned and stared at Chu Li. Chu Li scoffed. Their souls will be destroyed. It's impossible for them to reincarnate. This is the consequence of wreaking havoc in the Ji dynasty. Chapter 1852. Chu Li laughed out loud. Too much. Compared to their cruel killing of civilians, this is still considered light. If there's a heavier punishment, they'll be sent to the 18th level of hell and tortured layer by layer. You're so cruel. Dong Guangyi shook his head. You're considered a prominent figure now, yet you're so narrow-minded. How laughable. Chu Li frowned. He could not be bothered to talk to him anymore. He said in a low voice, Young? Pao Shu? Stupid Su Qi is so timid. Guanadin? Qiu Qi Yi Sang Jun. He could feel Dong Guangyi's strength and the immense pressure he exerted. It was obvious that his cultivation level had increased greatly. You have a good eye. Dong Guangyi chuckled and looked pleased. I had a fortuitous encounter, and my martial arts improved greatly. I'm no worse than you now, am I? He realized that Chu Li was also improving, but in terms of cultivation level, he was already better than Chu Li. Moreover, he had cultivated a mystical technique that was enough to restrain Chu Li's palm energy and Sky Killer Sword, so he was not afraid of Chu Li. Even if he could not win, he could retreat unscathed. Chu Li was a little afraid of Dong Guangyi. The most important thing was the Black Tortoise Shield. If the Black Tortoise Shield could block the Sky Regicide Sword, then his most powerful move would be useless. He could only use the Supreme Vajra Palm. The power of the Supreme Vajra Palm was tyrannical, but lacked a bit of murderous nature and had a bit more of a neutral and peaceful feeling. Chu Li said, Cultivation level is cultivation level. We'll only know who's better when we fight. Make your move. As soon as he finished speaking, he struck with his palm. A golden light descended from the sky and landed on his palm. Both palms turned golden and dazzling. Dong Guangyi raised his hand, and the shadow of a black tortoise slowly appeared in the void and landed on him. His body was faintly in the shape of a black tortoise, as if a black tortoise's soul was protecting his body. A blue light flashed in Chu Li's eyes, and a god-punishing thunder sword shot out. Bang! Dong Guangyi swayed but quickly steadied himself. He smiled proudly. Chu Li, soul attacks are useless against me. I'm protected by my ancestor's soul. Don't waste your energy. Chu Li said faintly, It's extraordinary indeed. Then take this. He pressed his palms towards Dong Guangyi. 2 golden lights flashed and instantly reached Dong Guangyi's chest. This was also the power of the Supreme Vajra Palm. As long as the palm was unleashed, it would definitely hit, and the opponent would almost never be able to dodge it. After his palms turned golden, his body also sped up along with his palms. His speed was faster than usual, like a streak of light. Dong Guangyi smiled and let his palms hit his chest. Bang! A muffled sound was heard. Dong Guangyi took a step back and so did Chu Li. Chu Li frowned. The powerful rebounding force from his palms forced him to retreat. He could feel that his palm force had not penetrated Dong Guangyi's body. Dong Guangyi was like the supreme Vajra indestructible body that he had cultivated and could block his palm force. He had always been the one to block the palm force of others. It was rare to see such a situation. Dong Guangyi laughed out loud. Chu Li, are you hungry? Chu Li's face darkened as he struck out with his golden palms again. Bang! Dong Guangyi still let his palm hit his chest. After both of them took a step back, Dong Guangyi was even more delighted. He knew that he could completely block Chu Li. He laughed and said, Chu Li, what else do you have now? Why don't you try using the Sky Killer Sword? As he spoke, he raised the black tortoise shield in his left hand. Chu Li's face darkened as he sneered. Don't be so smug. I like to see whose cultivation level is higher. Again, bang, 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 bang. He kept hitting Dong Guangyi's chest with his palms, as if he was being stubborn. He did not hit anywhere else, only his chest. Dong Guangyi wanted to completely destroy Chu Li's confidence and push him down from the throne of the world's #1 master. He wanted to take the throne himself, so he accompanied Chu Li in his madness. He wanted to defeat him head-on. Bang, 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 bang. The continuous muffled sound was like the beating of a drum. However, there were no soldiers around. Chu Li used the omniscient mirror to observe and found that all the soldiers in the military camp were practicing as usual. They were not curious about the muffled sound and did not leave the military camp to observe or inquire about it. Chu Li knew that Dong Guangyi must have discussed this with Zheng Shilai. Even so, he could see that the Zheng dynasty's soldiers were strict. However, in terms of military discipline, King Ping's soldiers were not inferior to them. As long as King Ping was given enough time, it was possible for him to turn the tables and even turn the tables. Dong Guangyi kept laughing and mocking Chu Li. Chu Li, can you do it? If you can't, just admit defeat. I won't kill you. Is this the style of the world's #1 master? I'm embarrassed for you, Chu Li. In my opinion, just admit defeat. Don't feel indignant anymore. Go back and practice well. Come back and challenge me again. Forget about 100 palms. Even if you hit me another 100 palms, you still won't be able to defeat me. Let's just forget about it. All right, 200 palms. You do have some skills. I'm a little impressed by you. Your cultivation level is low, but your stamina is strong. I'm impressed. If you can withstand 200 palms, what about 300? Can you still hit 300 palms? Dong Guangyi kept attacking Chu Li's confidence, trying to destroy his spirit. He was speechless at the fact that Chu Li was able to launch 200 palm strikes in a row. He knew that Chu Li's powerful palm technique required him to exhaust all of his inner energy with each strike, but he was able to replenish it in time. It was evident that the heart technique he cultivated was marvelous. If Chu Li only relied on the true supreme titanium scripture, he would not be able to instantly restore his cultivation level. However, with the help of the life and death scripture, the spiritual energy from Outland was endless. It forcefully poured in and turned into the true supreme titanium scripture's inner energy, restoring his cultivation level. After 300 palms, Dong Guangyi was a little surprised. The black tortoise's shadow behind him began to solidify. He had already used the black tortoise's power, which was the accumulated power of the black tortoise shield in his hand. The black tortoise shield was the size of a palm, but it had accumulated a huge amount of power. He usually poured energy into the black tortoise shield when he was free, but he could not fill it up no matter what. It was like a bottomless pit. The more he was filled, the more he wanted to fill it up. He did not know how much inner energy he had poured into it. This made him extremely curious. He had also tried it before. Whenever he needed it, he could draw the inner energy that he had poured into the black tortoise shield. It was endless, and he did not know when it would be used up. With this black tortoise shield, he did not have to worry about his inner energy being used up. The black tortoise shield power that he used was recorded on the black tortoise shield. It was powerful, but it consumed a lot of inner energy. However, With the black tortoise shield, he did not have to worry about having insufficient inner energy. He was confident that he could exhaust Chu Li. At this time, he became stubborn and insisted on exhausting Chu Li. After 400 palms, Dong Guangyi was still full of inner energy. There was no abnormality, but his mouth was not idle. Chu Li, you've used all your strength, haven't you? What's the use? World's #1 master, I'm embarrassed for you. If it was me, if I couldn't win after so many palms, I would have lost my face long ago. Your skin is thicker than your cultivation level. The power in Chu Li's palms gradually weakened. The golden light was no longer as dazzling as before, and his movements were much slower. Dong Guangyi became more and more pleased. Your cultivation level is indeed strong, but unfortunately, there's always someone stronger than you. Chu Li, you're still a notch below me. Chu Li pursed his lips and remained silent. He continued to attack. Chapter 1853. Seeing that Chu Li was silent and was desperately waving his palms, and his palm energy was getting weaker, Dong Guangyi became more pleased and grinned. I say, Chu Li, stop. Don't lose too badly and embarrass yourself. After all, you were once the world's #1 master. Chu Li continued to attack without saying a word. What's the point of fighting like this? I'll never run out of inner energy. What about you? Dong Guangyi shook his head and laughed. You can't even hold on now, can you? Do you think you'll have a chance to defeat me because you recover quickly? Chu Li scoffed. Dong Guangyi laughed. What's the use of recovering quickly? My inner energy is endless. Haha. Chu Li's face was so gloomy that water could drip from it. Dong Guangyi saw his gloomy expression and became even more pleased. Thinking that the person in front of him was the world's #1 master, he could not help but feel proud and heroic. He felt that from now on, he could do whatever he wanted in the world, and the title of the world's #1 would belong to him. Since ancient times, in tens of thousands of years, how many people had truly become the world's #1? He would definitely leave his name in history. Chu Li continued to attack, and the golden light on his palms became dimmer. On the other hand, Dong Guangyi felt that although Chu Li's palm energy was slightly weaker, it was not too weak. This was how it should be and how it could show off Chu Li's abilities. If Chu Li was so weak that he could not even use his palm, it would be a trick. Dong Guangyi sighed. Thinking of your power just now, I'm on guard. I can't be like you. Chu Li stared at him coldly and continued to attack without saying a word. Dong Guangyi laughed. But don't worry, I won't be like you because I'm luckier than you, haha. Chu Li frowned and scoffed. Dong Guangyi said proudly, to be honest, my aptitude is not the best. I'm definitely not as good as you, but I'm lucky. I've been lucky since I was young and had many fortuitous encounters to cultivate to this point. I believe that I'll have more fortuitous encounters and become stronger. Chu Li saw that he was so proud and asked, what fortuitous encounters did you have? Many fortuitous encounters. Dong Guangyi laughed. When I was young, I played in Black Tortoise Mountain and was bitten by a snake. Not only did I not die, but I also gained a strong inner energy. Chu Li raised his eyebrows and continued to strike with his palm. This time, his palm energy was slightly stronger. Dong Guangyi laughed out loud. He knew that Chu Li had been stimulated. He laughed out loud and said, that was just the beginning. After that, I went to look for that snake. In the end, I really found it. I killed it and ate it. As a result, I stepped into the innate mastery's boundary in one go. Haha, I don't even know how I entered the Xiantian realm. I fainted without knowing it, and when I opened my eyes, I've become a Xiantian master. Chu Li frowned and scoffed. What a joke. Dong Guangyi shook his head and said, I also think it's funny. That's why I became the youngest innate master in the mountain. I was 11 years old at that time. Chu Li said, you're a nobody in the Black Tortoise Mountain. Haha, this is the power of master, martial uncles, and martial ancestors. Dong Guangyi proudly smiled and said, they saw my potential and wanted to use me as a surprise attack, so they deliberately conceal my existence. From then on, No disciple is allowed to mention my name. How can they lock the news? Chu Li scoffed. Dong Guangyi said, I started to leave the mountain when I was 11 years old. I wandered alone and traveled to famous mountains and rivers. Because of my good luck, I might be able to gain something by entering famous mountains and rivers. Chu Li frowned and nodded. This was indeed the best choice. Dong Guangyi smiled and said, I didn't expect that I would have many fortuitous encounters. I've seen many caves and learned a wide variety of mystical arts and antique studies. Unknowingly, I've entered the Grandmaster's boundary. Impossible. Chu Li shook his head and said, If I don't enter the surpassing state, how can I enter the Grandmaster's boundary? This is the power of fortuitous encounters. Dong Guangyi said proudly, I don't know where I broke into. Maybe I was in the surpassing state, but I didn't know it. Then, after staying for a while, I unknowingly became a Grandmaster. Chu Li's face darkened. He gritted his teeth and said, What good luck! Dong Guangyi laughed and said, Not only did I become a Grandmaster, I also obtained a treasure. It's this black tortoise shield in my hand. Chu Li frowned and scoffed. Dong Guangyi said, In the beginning, I didn't think much of this black tortoise shield because it was too inconspicuous. I almost threw it away. It's only because it's a tortoise shell and the black tortoise power that I kept it. When I returned to the mountain and began to cultivate the black tortoise power officially, I realized the power of this black tortoise shield. With its help, I advanced by leaps and bounds and perfected the black tortoise power in one go. When my master ascended to heaven, I took over as an enlightened master and became the youngest enlightened master in the history of the Black Tortoise Mountain. Ha! This is all thanks to the black tortoise shield. As he spoke, he proudly shook the black tortoise shield in his left hand. Chu Li glanced at the black tortoise shield and said coldly, It's just a tortoise shell. You make it sound so mystical. What a joke. Ha! Chu Li, you're too ignorant. Dong Guangyi shook his head and said, You know about spirit beasts, right? Chu Li lightly said, I have. Dong Guangyi smiled and said, This black tortoise shield is the shell of a supreme grade spirit beast, black tortoise. A supreme grade spirit beast? Its abilities are unimaginable. The tortoise shell it left behind is even more mystical. It's a piece of cake for it to be able to block the Sky Regicide sword. It has even more magical uses. Tell me about it. His palms became dimmer, but his palm energy was only slightly weaker. He continued to strike. He faintly felt that the Supreme Vajra palm was about to advance. After so many times of using all his strength, the Supreme Vajra palm was showing signs of breaking through. This was how the Supreme Vajra palm broke through. It could not be cultivated normally. It needed a strong opponent to stimulate and suppress it. Only then could it break through. Dong Guangyi said, This black tortoise shield can store inner energy. As long as you pour your inner energy into it, it can be extracted when needed. You can extract as much as you pour in. Think about it. How can you compare to me? Chu Li frowned. It won't dissipate. It won't. Dong Guangyi shook his head. Chu Li scoffed and said, It's magical indeed. Dong Guangyi laughed out loud and was extremely pleased. He was especially satisfied to show off in front of Chu Li. Making his opponent envious and jealous was the happiest thing. He laughed and said, So Chu Li, don't waste your energy. It's better if you surrender now. I can spare your life as long as I cripple your cultivation level. Chu Li sneered. What's the difference between crippling my cultivation level and killing me? He had too many enemies. Once his martial arts was crippled, he would not be able to live. Dong Guangyi obviously thought so. He wanted to kill him with a borrowed knife. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.